The Gila River? Please. Let me say that shit wrong.
Sheet. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, Dave, can you confirm how you pronounce the arena? What's the arena's name? Gila? Gila. Gila.
Gila?
River.
Gila.
Gila River is what they're telling me.
Ooh,
Yes.
okay.
That's soft G. That's fancy stuff.
Yes. Was not expecting that one.
Huh? Yeah.
Hello, Mike. How are you?
What's up, brother?
What's happening?
Man, you know, just kicking it. I feel like I need to have a bottle of liquor up here and pour some out.
I know that Charlie wants to understand. It actually would be easier just to
Pour a little liquor out for the homies, dog.
Hey. They didn't give you one?
Yeah.
They told me that they were going to give you one.
I wasn't aware.
I mean, it might look more natural for me to hold it, honestly.
Wow.
The card is stacked. This is one of those cards that I'm excited about, my staff is excited about, the internet's excited about it.
They can't all be finishes, but Israel Adesanya gets the job done tonight by split decision.
Oh my goodness, crazy! What a fight!
That, to me, was Fight of the Year 2020.
Absolute war. Doesn't get any better than that.
24/7 is daily. Shit, the reason they pay me. The first one and last one up out of the building, cause what I've been building is crazy. This, that, hard work, my state built different. All day, it's go time. We've been on a mission. Better hope you ain't slacking when you run into me. Cause every day I check my back, we ready for war. All day, it's go time. I'm ready for war.
Win, lose, every fight I fight is going to be the biggest fight. My long-term goal is to be the best of all time.
I'm a bona fide star. I know I got the it factor. I just beat these guys very dominantly. I leave no doubt.
All day, it's no time. I'm ready for war.
For the first time in more than 2 years, the UFC returns to the Valley of the Sun. Gila River Arena in Glendale, Arizona, set to host UFC 263, headlined by Israel Adesanya, defending his middleweight championship against Marvin Vettori. And just moments from now, you will see Adesanya, Vettori, and every fighter on this UFC 263 card step on that scale right there for their official weigh-in. And with that, we say hello and welcome to the official UFC 263 weigh-in show here on ESPN Plus. I'm Michael Eaves. As if a rematch between Adesanya and Vettori with all their bad blood wasn't enough to be hyped about Saturday's pay-per-view event, the UFC also added another championship bout that also happens to be a rematch, as well as the long-awaited return of one of the most beloved fighters in UFC history. That's right, Nate Diaz is back in the house. The pride of Stockton, California, stepping back into the cage for the first time in more than a year and a half to trade blows with top welterweight contender Leon Edwards in a 5-round battle, which could very well catapult the winner into a title shot. In the co-main event, one of the best fights of 2020 gets another run as Deiveson Figueiredo seeks to continue his reign as flyweight champion against Brandon Moreno. Figueiredo's 6-fight unbeaten streak is the longest active streak in the 125-pound division. And then, of course, there is the rematch, headlining UFC 263, that's been more than 3 years in the making. Israel Adesanya faced Marvin Vettori in April of 2018 in just his second UFC fight for the last stylebender. He walked away with a split decision, a decision that has bothered Vettori ever since. So 2 title fights and the return of Nate Diaz provides one of the deepest UFC pay-per-view main cards of the year. Along with the aforementioned matchups, Demian Maia seeks to tie Cowboy Cerrone for the most UFC wins as he takes on Belal Muhammad. Light heavyweights kick off the main card as Paul Craig and Jamal Hill get things going at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 Pacific, exclusively on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. So now you know what's going on and how to get it. Let's bring in my compadres here on the official weigh-in show. Of course, Brett Okamoto joins us now from there in Arizona, as does Ariel Helwani. The last time we will have Ariel Helwani kicking it with us here on the official weigh-in show on ESPN Plus. Ariel, it's always good to work with you, brother, especially today. How you living?
Amen. Thank you so much, Michael. Pleasure to be with you guys as well. And, you know, for the last one, I said, let's go out with a bang. This is a tremendous card, something for everyone, right? On the main card, you've got bad blood between Jamal Hill and Paul Craig. You've got potential last fight ever in the UFC for a legend, Demian Maia, going up against the surging Belal Muhammad. The return of the icon, Nathan Diaz, against the very red-hot Leon Edwards, who's on the cusp of finally fighting for a title. Rematch of arguably the greatest fight of last year. Deiveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno, the fight that ended in a draw in December. And then, of course, the supremely hotly contested rematch between Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori, a rematch of a fight that happened a little over 3 years ago in the same arena. What are the chances of that? These two met 3 years ago in Glendale. They'll meet again on Saturday night, this time for the middleweight title. And, you know, Brett, when you think of these fights, and especially the top 3, you know, I was talking to our guy, New York Rick, on Wednesday, and I asked him, which of the 3 are you most looking forward to? And I don't feel like there is a correct answer here. He actually went with the hipster pick. He went with the flyweight title fight. And so I'll ask you before I weigh in, of the top 3 fights, which of course are getting the most amount of attention, which one are you most looking forward to?
Well, let me start off by saying that I'm not surprised that New York Rick went with the hipster pick. I mean, without you telling me that that was his pick, I would have said, of course, New York Rick is going with the flyweights. But I like it, and it might be the right call. I think at the end of the night, we are probably going to look back and say that that was the best fight, at least of the action that took place in the octagon. I just think stylistically, obviously, the way that they matched up late last year, nothing's going to change between now and then. They've made some adjustments. Now they know a little bit more, obviously, about one another, but it's still going to be an action-packed fight. It's it's going to be similar to what we saw last year, which was fight of the year, in my opinion. But I'm going to go with the main event. And I don't know if that would have been my answer before yesterday's press conference. But Ariel, you know, sometimes those press conferences, they can be a little dull. The energy's not really there. The energy was there at the press conference yesterday. It was one of those times where you can say that really did elevate my excitement level for all three fights, quite frankly. But for the main event, more so than the other two, just because I think it's just Marvin Vettori, man. Angry Marvin Vettori is a fun guy. Israel's always fun, and Marvin's coming with a whole lot of confidence that he could beat Israel Adesanya, and I love the way that he's approaching this fight week.
So we are expecting 28 fighters to step on that scale. It's about to pop off in a second here, but let me ask you before the first guy shows up, if we could sneak it in. Speaking of that press conference and speaking of the main event, what a scene it was yesterday. It felt like the week was moving a little slowly, and then all of a sudden the press conference happens and everything changed. It was an explosion. Do you feel like Marvin was a little too emotional, a little too fired up? He kind of broke at the end there, throwing the bottle, all that stuff. Was that, it's good to be pumped up. It's good to be passionate, but do you feel like he showed that maybe Izzy is too much under his skin?
Well, I had the benefit of talking to him right after that, and he was very, very calm. You know, he even wanted me to touch his pulse and take his pulse and say, look, I'm back down to resting heart rate of 60. You know, I'm not too fired up, but he was fired up in that moment. And what is he going to be like in the fight? That's really the big question. You know, it's fine to get fired up in the press conference and then be calm after the press conference, but if you get fired up during the fight, I mean, he can't make mistakes. You cannot make mistakes against a clever counter striker like Israel Adesanya. So that's a big question. And I do think that if you're a Marvin Vettori fan, you are a little concerned that he went that ham during a press conference. What is he going to be like in the fight?
All right. So without further ado, let us kick things off. And we say hello now to the pride of Birmingham, England, Leon Edwards. Potential massive weekend for English sport fans. Of course, Euro 2020 kicking off. England playing on Sunday morning here in the United States. There it is. First one on the scale, Leon Rocky Edwards, 170.5, unbeaten in his last 8. Of course, had that unfortunate no contest against Bilal Muhammad back in March. And he is going up against Nathan Diaz. And most suspect he wins this fight, he'll be next for a title shot. Now, we suspect that Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington will fight for the welterweight title sometime later this year, perhaps as soon as later this summer. But Leon Edwards at that point would have done enough in most people's eyes. And you get a big win over a big name like Nathan Diaz. That should do it. The interesting thing that I think we all want to see how it plays out, what happens if Nathan Diaz wins? Does he get a title shot as well? So interesting.
Moreno.
All right, we'll say hello now to Brandon Moreno, who also had a great showing at the press conference. All 6 fighters on the dais represented in their own way. And Brandon Moreno had a lot of fans in attendance. A lot of Hispanic fans backing the Mexican native. Getting another crack at the flyweight title here in Arizona.
The official weight for Brandon Moreno.
So Moreno is good to go. What a great fight that was between Dos de Guerra and the Assassin Baby back in December. If not for Zhang Weili versus Ioana Jędrzejczyk in March of last year, that would have been, without a doubt, the fight of the year for 2020. Guy who got released from the UFC when it looked like the flyweight division was going to be closed. Turned, but now he is on the cusp once again of fighting for the flyweight title.
Tomorrow night, the number 3 ranked middleweight contender, the Italian Dream, Marvin Vettori.
Marvin Vettori, never short on energy, never short on passion. Doesn't need the triple shot espresso. Just go with the single. Getting a chance to fight for the belt for the first time, would be the first Italian-born fighter to win a UFC title if he pulls off the upset Saturday night against his rival, the last Stylebender.
184.5 pounds.
So he is good to go. A big weekend as well for Italian sports. The Italian side kicking things off. Euro 2020 later on today.
The steamroller Frivola.
All right, so we had some big names at the top of the bill kicking things off. We'll now move down the card and say hello to Matt Frivola, 8-2-1, going up against Terrence McKinney. He is of Huntington, New York, Long Island.
155, the official weight for Matt Frivola.
So Frivola weighs in at 155. Been a big few days for Long Island sports. Chris Wade picking up a big win last night. PFL, of course, the Islanders making it to the Stanley Cup semifinal.
Prelim live on ESPN in the UFC's lightweight division. 13th ranked contender Drew Dober.
Here comes Drew Dober, who can easily moonlight as a male model in his spare time. Looking to get back on track after his loss to Islam Makhachev. Big fight for him against Brad Riddell. 23-10 is Drew Dober, but that really doesn't tell the story of the last few years for the 32-year-old.
154, the official weight for Drew Dober.
154 for Drew Dober. Had a 3-fight winning streak snap. Had won 6 of 7 going into that Islam Makhachev fight. Looking to get back on track against the CKB product Brad Riddell, who is allergic to boring fights.
To the scale in the UFC women's bantamweight division, one of the game's foremost veterans, Alexis Davis.
Pride of Canada, Alexis Davis. They call her Alligator, 36 years young. She has been around the game for quite some time, a Cesar Gracie product as well. Born in Port Colborne, Ontario. Of course, Nathan Diaz, Cesar Gracie product. Cesar Gracie actually in Arizona with Nathan Diaz. Bit of a reunion. Coming off a win over Sabina Mazo. She meets Penny Kianzad tomorrow night.
.134 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Alexis Davis.
Alexis Davis is good to go. 20-10 as a pro, some big wins throughout her career. First fought Ronda Rousey back at 175.
He is the 15th ranked featherweight in the world at present, Min Hakeem Dawodu.
We'll keep the Canadian theme rolling along. Min Hakeem is here, 12-1-1. This man is on quite the roll as well. Won his last 5 in a row. Going up against Movsar Evloev.
145 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Hakeem Dawodu.
Yes, always a very intense individual. Min Hakeem is good to go. He is climbing the ranks.
All right, next fighter to the scale. She is the 11th ranked UFC women's bantamweight contender, Penny Kianzad.
Here's the aforementioned Penny Kianzad. Going up against Alexis Davis. Born in Iran, fighting out of Denmark. She's won her last 3 in a row, coming off a big win over Sajara Eubanks. Prior to that, Betch Coher. Prior to that, Jessica Rose Clark. Longest winning streak for her in the UFC.
135 1/2, the official weight for Penny Kianzad.
They call her Bonsai. Have a big opportunity against Alexis Davis, the veteran, tomorrow night.
All right, next fighter to the scale in the UFC's lightweight division, set to make his promotional debut here tomorrow night. Please welcome Terrence McKinney.
All right, here's Terrence McKinney. T-Rex, they call him, 10-3 as a pro. As John Anik just said, making his debut, LFA product. Fighting out of Spokane, Washington. 26 years young.
155 1/2, the official weight for Terrence McKinney.
He is good to go. Born in Chicago, making his UFC debut in his 14th
next fighter to the scale,
fight.
set to compete live on pay-per-view tomorrow night, the 12th ranked UFC welterweight contender, Bilal, remember the name, Muhammad.
Here is Bilal Muhammad. Coming off that no contest against Leon Edwards. He was poked in the eye accidentally unbeaten in his last 5 fights, going up against the legend Damian Maia in what could be Damian Maia's final UFC fight.
.170 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Bilal Muhammad.
Muhammad is good to go. Big opportunity for him. He was disappointed that he didn't get the rematch against Leon Edwards, but here he is on the same card against a very big name.
All right, next fighter to weigh in the UFC's featherweight division, Chase Hooper.
Here's a member of the Funky family, Chase Hooper. He meets Steven Peterson, the early prelims. Still just 21 years young. I mean, look at that face. Baby face. Skin and bones.
145.5, the official weight for the Dream, Chase Hooper.
He lost his first pro fight to Alex Caceres last June, got back on track against Peter Barrett in December, looking to string together 2 straight wins here tomorrow night.
All right, next fighter to the scale in the UFC's light heavyweight division, charged with kicking off the pay-per-view main card here tomorrow night. He is 15th ranked, Jamal Hill.
Here is Jamal Hill, who goes up against Paul Craig. They had a bit of a run-in in the hotel. Some cameras caught it. Bad blood here between the 2 big boys. Jamal Hill, 8-0. Sweet dreams, they call him. 30 years young. Fighting out of Michigan. Has looked good in the UFC so far. Big win in his last fight against Ovin St. Preux. 2-0 in the UFC. 1-0 contest.
205 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill.
He is also a Contender Series product. This fight was supposed to happen in March. Hill had to withdraw.
All right, next fighter to the scale, 14th ranked in the UFC's featherweight division. He is Movsar Evloev.
And here is the aforementioned Evloev, 14-0 as a pro, fighting out of Russia, born in Russia as well. Coming off a split decision win over Nick Lentz. Prior to that, Mike Grundy. Prior to that, Enrique Barzola. He is undefeated in the UFC, of course. 4-0 inside the octagon. He meets Hakeem Dawoudou tomorrow night.
145.5, the official weight for Movsar Evloev.
Big time fight between 2 up-and-comers. At 145 pounds, he weighs in at 145.
All right, next fighter to the scale has a massive fight on her hands here tomorrow night in the UFC women's flyweight division. 3rd ranked, Lauren Murphy.
Here's Lauren Murphy. This fight not getting talked about enough, but some serious title implications. The winner of this fight could very well be next for the flyweight champion, Valentina Shevchenko. And Lauren Murphy has really put it all together after having a tough time stringing together wins in the UFC. She is now on a 4-fight winning streak. Really looking good as of late. Training out of Houston these days. She meets Joanne Calderwood tomorrow.
$125.5, the official weight for Lauren Murphy.
Lucky Lauren Murphy, good to go. 14-4 as a pro. And she feels like a win over Joanne Calderwood.
Next fighter to the scale, set to compete live on pay-per-view tomorrow night. 14th ranked in the UFC's light heavyweight division. He is Paul Bear Jew Craig.
Yes. The aforementioned Paul Craig. Coming off that huge win over Shogun Rua, the legend. He is unbeaten in his last 4 fights. Of course, had the draw with Shogun Rua back in 2019 as well. Beats Jamal Hill tomorrow night. First fight on the main card.
204.5, the official weight for Paul Craig.
Listen to John Anik roll those R's. Very impressive.
All right, next athlete to the scale in the UFC's lightweight division, Fares Ziam.
All right, we'll keep things rolling along here. Say hello to Fares Ziam, who's fighting on the second fight of the night against Luigi Vendaramini, excuse me. Fares fighting out of France.
156 pounds, the official weight for Fares Ziam.
1-1 inside the octagon, coming off a win over Jamie Malarkey back in October. Going up against Luigi Vendramini.
All right, next fighter to the scale is one of the biggest superstars in the sport and the man many of you came to see, the mixed martial arts legend, Nathan Diaz.
Ah, yes, here he is, Nathan Diaz. And I'm liking that we're starting to finally adopt his real first name. There he is, the Pride of Stockton. Mixed martial arts royalty. Returning for the first time since November of 2019. Haven't seen him since that BMF fight in
170 pounds, the official weight for Nate Diaz.
We went back to Nate. Come on now. It's Nathan. Nathan Diaz, 170 pounds. That means his fight against Leon Edwards is good to go. Leon Edwards, in case you missed it, the first fighter to step on the scale.
All right, next fighter to the scale in the UFC's lightweight division, we welcome Luigi Vendramini.
14 fights total, 28 fighters will step on the scale today between 12 and 2 p.m. Eastern. Here's the Brazilian, 9-1, Luigi Vendramini, who is of Italian descent, as you can guess from that name.
155 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Luigi Vendramini.
1-1 inside the octagon, coming off a win back in October. He meets Fares Ziam.
All right, next fighter to the scale, 6th ranked in the UFC women's flyweight division, Joanne Calderwood.
2 Scottish fighters on this card. We saw Paul Craig moments ago. We'll say hello now to one of the most well-liked fighters in the sport today, Joanne Calderwood, now training out of Las Vegas. Of course, engaged to John Wood, head coach over at Syndicate MMA in Vegas, coming off a win over Jessica Ai.
125, the official weight for Joanne Calderwood.
There she is, Dr. Neville. Had a title shot against Valentina Shevchenko. The fight got canceled due to the pandemic, due to a Shevchenko knee injury. She chose
to fight
next
fighter
Jennifer
to the scale,
Maia.
competing in the UFC's light heavyweight division here tomorrow night, Darren the Dentist Stewart.
But she hopes to get that title shot with a big win over Lauren Murphy. Say hello now to the dentist, Darren Stewart. Always involved in fun fights. Tomorrow night he meets Eric Anders, fighting out of East London, England. It's a rematch of a fight that happened back in March, ended in a no contest.
204.5, the official weight for the dentist, Darren Stewart.
Legal knee ended the fight in the first round. And so they meet again, hoping to
and his opponent,
produce a
Eric,
decisive winner.
Your boy Anders.
All right. Always love when this happens. Here's Eric Anders walking to the scale. 13-5 as a pro. Of course, the University of Alabama product. Hasn't won since October of 2019. Looking to get back on
205
track.
pounds, the official weight for Eric Anders.
All right, so the Darren Stewart, Eric Anders rematch is good to go. That one taking place on the prelims right before the main card, which starts at 10 p.m. Eastern.
All right, next fighter to the scale, competing in the first fight of the night live on ESPN and UFC Fight Pass in the heavyweight division, Carlos Felipe.
You don't always see the big boys kicking off a card. And we just saw your boy. Here's boy, Carlos Boy Felipe, 10-1 as a pro, 26 years young. He is a big boy. He's won his last 2 in a row, coming off a split decision win over Justin Tafa. He meets Jake Collier in the curtain jerker.
262.5, the official weight for Carlos Felipe.
All right, so 4 pounds under the non-title heavyweight limit. There's Carlos Felipe.
And his opponent at heavyweight tomorrow night will be Jake the Prototype Collier.
All right, we get to see Jake Collier now, 12-5 as a pro. He is fighting out of Missouri, coming off a win over John Vellante back in December. He's been in the UFC since 2014.
264.5, the official weight for Jake Collier.
So he is a 1.5 pounds under the non-title heavyweight limit. 6'3", 32-year-old Jake Collier, born Rodney Collier, now going by Jake Collier. That fight will kick off the 14-fight UFC 263 card, which goes down, of course, in Glendale, a city that has hosted many a great MMA event. Of course, most notable WEC 53 back in December of 2010. That was the final WEC card. That was Anthony Pettis and Benson Henderson in the main event. The fight that produced the infamous Showtime kick. No one will ever forget that one. And the final round and final minute of the final WEC card, we'll see what UFC 263 produces. So we've seen a lot of the big names show up, some still left. In fact, 5 still left, Brett. Israel Adesanya, Deiveson Figueiredo, Damian Maia, Brad Riddell, and Steven Peterson. So some big names still there. And of course, Deiveson Figueiredo, there's still always a little bit of concern regarding his weight. He's had some issues in the past, although his manager, Walid Ismail, told me earlier this week that he's in great form. Any takeaways from what we just saw?
I mean, Nate looked like he was in good shape, you know, which is not a surprise. I mean, everything that I've heard about Nate's preparations for this one, I mean, he knows that it's an important fight for him. And honestly, Nate Diaz really kind of always comes to fight. There was that one performance that he had against Rafael dos Anjos where, you know, he was a little disgruntled. He wasn't happy with his contract. He got fined that week. That was really the only performance in which it kind of felt like Nate didn't want to be there, at least that I can remember. I mean, otherwise, he's always well prepared, but it's nice to see him, especially at this point in his career, when he's been a little less active. You're always curious to see how Nate's going to look. And, I mean, yeah, he's looked comfortable. He looks like he's enjoying himself. He's got the big group around him, surrounding him this week. You know, he's smoking on stage, press conferences. Nate Diaz is enjoying himself. So, and he looked loose again this morning on the scale.
Yeah, the big group, which includes his brother, the also very popular Nick Diaz. So again, 28 fighters competing on Saturday night. Michael, 23 have showed up, if my math is correct. 23 good to go, still waiting on 5, including the champ Israel Adesanya. But for now, we will send it back to you in Bristol.
All right, Ariel, more from you and Brett coming up. But let's look a little deeper into one of the other fights in this card that doesn't involve a championship belt. 209. Now, that number may not be that familiar to most people unless you are from the area of Stockton, California, which is the home of Nate Diaz. Now, throughout his entire MMA career, Diaz has represented his hometown arguably better and harder than any fighter on the UFC roster, and for good reason. Stockton has helped shape Diaz into who he is and what he's all about.
They don't want it with me. You got a problem with me? Love, you don't want it with me. Man, you won't ever stop me.
Located deep in the Central Valley of California, the city of Stockton is home to one of the realest OGs in the fight game. A true West Coast gangster personified, a true 09 Shogun, a Stockton samurai, a martial artist who just likes to do ninja.
Fighting out of Stockton, California, Nate Diaz!
Nate, no nickname needed. Diaz represents the way of the Cali warrior. Molded by the great Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Rich Perez boxing, and Nick Diaz Army mindset. Diaz's tell me when and where, in any day of the week you can get it attitude, captivated all those who have witnessed it, and those who opposed it. Y'all for the birds. The younger disciple of Brother Nick, leader of the Nick Diaz Army, Nate stayed true to the game and his roots, carrying on a legacy laid out by his brother, but carving his own path along the way.
It's Nick Diaz Army.
Anyone who speaks ill of the Diaz name or who chooses violence against him gets a 5-finger reminder that their words and actions have consequences. That Stockton slap.
The Stockton slap coming soon.
To say the name Diaz is to be the realest.
Look at real right here.
But if you ask me,
unfortunately we can't talk. Hey, I'm not surprised.
surprised.
This may seem like an understatement, but there is simply nobody quite like Nate Diaz in the UFC. He may not fight as often as he once did, but the man still ranks among the top fighters of all time. His 9 submission victories, more than 2,200 significant strikes, rank 4th all-time respectfully in UFC history. As we bring in Ariel and Brett back to the conversation. Brett, let me start with you. What does this fight mean for Nate Diaz at this stage in his career?
Man, I think that win or lose, Nate, for all the reasons that were just laid out in that feature package, and then you're listing out his stats, he's not going anywhere. I mean, if he loses this fight, he's expected to lose this fight. The odds the betting odds are very much against him. But I think it's an opportunity for him that if he still does want to be considered amongst the very, very elite of this sport, he's always going to be involved in big fights. I mean, and this guy, I think he told Stephen A. earlier this week that he's never going to retire. I mean, I think we're going to see Nate Diaz around in the sport in big fights for many years to come. We're not near the end of his career, but I think we're at that crossroads where are we thinking of him as a guy who can still potentially win a UFC championship? I mean, he's already, for most people, I think, kind of out of that conversation now, but that would change big time with a win over Leon Edwards, right? I mean, again, the guy's going to be involved in big fights. That has nothing to do with the result of what happened Saturday. But if he beats Leon Edwards, we could be talking about Nate Diaz fighting for a UFC championship. But if he loses, as the odds say that he will, then I don't know if we'll ever broach that topic again with Nate.
I want to get into the matchup a little more specifically here, Ariel, but let's go big picture real quickly because I asked Brett what this fight means for Nate Diaz. What has Nate Diaz meant for the UFC?
Oh, he's been a massive star ever since he came into the company. Tough 5, my favorite season of The Ultimate Fighter, by the way. He was just Nick's younger brother. Okay with being in the shadows. Okay with, taking a back seat to not only Nick Diaz, but Gilbert Melendez and Jake Shields. But then he fought Rafael dos Anjos a few years back, and that fight didn't go his way. And he said, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm going to start treating myself like the A-lister that I am, the A side, if you will, the big star that I am. He fights Michael Johnson in 2015. He calls out Conor McGregor in one of the greatest post-fight call-outs in the history of the sport. And then, of course, as you saw right over there in March of 2016, he submits Conor McGregor, and then everything changes for this guy. Now he's the bigger star than his brother Nick. Now he's one of the biggest stars in the sport. Dare I say, one of the biggest stars in the history of the sport. He is a superstar. And here's all that you need to know about Nathan Diaz. This man hasn't fought since November of 2019. He literally could fight anyone at 155 or 170. He could pick a guy who's ranked 25th and fight that guy and be in the same spot, headline a card, etc. He picked the guy who's on an 8-fight unbeaten streak, who's on the cusp of fighting for the belt, who looked fantastic in his last fight before the eye poke. He said, yeah, I want to fight that guy who's not a big star, who he doesn't get the rub off of, who he doesn't elevate by fighting him. He doesn't get elevated. Nate is elevating Leon Edwards here. He says, yeah, I want the toughest guy in the yard because I want to take away his winning streak. I don't want the biggest star. I just want the toughest guy. How many people do that in this sport? I'll tell you how many people. Very, very few. Maybe 1%. That's what makes him special. He's the real deal, and that's why the fans love him so much.
Yeah, that's just the epitome of Nate Diaz and his personality. They say, yeah, who's the toughest dude out here? I want to remind him that, no, I'm still Nate Diaz, and he may not be the toughest guy in this cage tonight. So with that said, Brett, let's go into the matchup a little more deeply here because as Ariel just pointed out, Nate's last fight was a loss to Jorge Masvidal, and it was a long time ago. This layoff is the second longest layoff of his career, second only to the layoff he had after taking down Conor McGregor. So what is the expectation, Brett, from the people you've spoken to on what form of Nate Diaz we will see in this fight?
Yeah, just to add one more thing to what Ariel said, the way that Nate described it to me one time is that he wants to be, when you're in school and the two guys are drawn back and forth at one another and they're going to fight in the playground after school. He's like, those are the fights that I want to put together. I want to put together those fights where everybody at school is surrounded the yard and they're watching me fight this guy. And so that's why he picked Leon Edwards, because of that 8-fight win streak and because he's saying then that is the guy that's beating everybody up. Well, then I will go beat him up. Now, how does he do it? Man, I think he's going to have to do it in the way in which he's kind of won all of his fights, right? I mean, Nate Diaz, his arguably his greatest skill has been his toughness. It has been his heart. It has been his ability to just drag guys into places that they don't want to go and beat them late. When he's bloodied up, that's why the fans love him, right? Is that Nate Diaz, he doesn't get in a boring fight. He doesn't play it safe. He doesn't point fight. In fact, he hates point fighting. He and his brother have notoriously been against point fighting. It's like, that's not even fighting to us. You go in and you finish the guy. Otherwise, it's not even a win in our book. So I think he's going to be very aggressive. I think he's going to want to test the cardio of Leon Edwards. I mean, we know that about the Diaz brothers, right? They train for triathlons. They're always in phenomenal shape. The problem here is that Leon has really not shown many holes. I mean, you don't win 8 fights in a row with holes that everybody can see. So Nate's going to have to go in there and find a hole, quite frankly, because there's no real angle on paper right now where you say that is Nate Diaz's path to victory. Leon Edwards has not had cardio problems. He has not had problems with a wrestler. He has not had problems with submission artists. He hasn't had problems with boxers, with the throw volume. So Nate has a challenge. He's got an uphill battle for him. And again, that just makes it so much more admirable that this is the fight that he wanted, because as Ariel said, he didn't have to fight Leon Edwards. Nate Diaz doesn't have to fight anybody. He gets to pick who he wants to fight. He chose this guy, but it is going to be a tough task on Saturday.
Ariel, what do you expect from this matchup?
Well, again, I am just so impressed that he picked Leon Edwards, because I was so impressed with Leon Edwards in his last fight. Now, I know that the fight ended unceremoniously and we didn't get to see the, complete body of work. But Leon Edwards was in phenomenal shape. He was en route to beating Belal Muhammad. It ended, unfortunately. It was an accidental eye poke, but made no mistake about it. Edwards was winning that fight, and he was going to win that fight. I was impressed with his speed, with his striking, with everything that he brought to the table in that fight back in March. And so what I think needs to happen for Nathan Diaz to try and pull off this upset, because make no mistake about it, he is the betting underdog, and he should be the betting underdog considering what Leon Edwards has done as of late, is try to suffocate him early, try to make him drown in the moment. Leon Edwards has never been in a spot like this before. I know it's not a title fight, and no, it's not a main event, but this is the biggest name that he has ever fought by far, and there's going to be a lot of eyeballs and a lot of pressure and a lot of nerves, a lot of anxiety, and Nathan has been here before, and so I think he has to come at him fast and aggressive and try to bring that Diaz output, that Diaz boxing in Leon's face, make him have nowhere to go, press him up against the cage, make it a dirty fight, but do not try to give Leon Edwards a chance to be comfortable, because the more this fight goes on, the longer it goes on, I think it actually favors Leon Edwards, because he'll get a lot more comfortable in this spot. Thank you, John Anik, for letting us know that Demian Maia is about to step onto the scale. Here he is, the legend of legends. Demian Maia never won a UFC title, but of course has fought for the belt before at 185 and 170 in what is the last fight on his UFC contract. He has not discussed his future. He has not said if this will be the end of his illustrious career. Man who lost to Gilbert Burns back in March.
170 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Demian Maia.
We're not talking enough about Demian Maia on this card, and it's unfortunate because there are so many big names at the very top. But this is a man who has handled himself with class and professionalism. Very few people have anything, if anyone out there has anything bad to say about Demian Maia. One of the good guys in the game. Had that big win over Ben Askren back in late 2019. And tomorrow night he meets Belal Muhammad in a very important fight for not just himself, but Belal Muhammad as well, as he tries to get back on track after the unfortunate no contest against Leon Edwards. So that means there are just 4 fighters left to step foot on the scale. Steven Peterson, Brad Riddell, Israel Adesanya, and Deiveson Figueiredo. The top 2, of course, have a lot of intrigue surrounding them. Deiveson Figueiredo, not that long ago, had some trouble on the scale. Of course, we all remember what happened in Fairfax, Virginia in February of 2020 when he missed weight prior to his vacant title fight against Joseph Benavidez and ended up winning that fight, but couldn't win the title. Of course, ended up winning the title in July in the rematch. But if you're a champion and you miss weight, it is catastrophic. So not suggesting that that's the case here, but still a lot more intrigue to go as we're just 35 minutes in to this weigh-in show with 4 fighters left. 24 have successfully made weight, and that is very good to see. All right, Michael, back to you in Bristol.
Yeah, Ariel, you were talking that this fight with Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards clearly is not a title fight, but it has title fight implications on it, clearly. Kamaru Usman running this division, and quite well, I might add. But Leon Edwards is right there on the cusp. Who's, in terms of title implications, who's this fight more valuable for? It's got to be Leon Edwards, right?
Yeah, I actually think that all the pressure is on Leon Edwards, and that's sort of what I was alluding to just moments ago, because Leon Edwards is the guy who's been scratching and clawing to try and get to this spot. Diaz is in this spot, and I actually disagree with Brett. I think he loses this fight, he wins one more, we're back to talking about Nathan Diaz being a title contender. That's just how big of a star that he is. If Leon Edwards loses this fight, he goes all the way back to the bottom of the ladder. I mean, they've been reluctant to put him in a big-time spot because he's just not a big draw. He doesn't sell himself very well. He doesn't have a loyal and passionate following. That following is starting to develop just now, and it's unfortunate because he's a great fighter and a great person with a great backstory. So he has to win this fight, punch his ticket. There are no tickets left to punch if he wins this fight. He'll wait. He'll fight the winner, most likely, of Colby Covington versus Kamaru Usman. It would be a rematch against Kamaru Usman of a fight that happened back in 2014, I do believe. And him and Covington have shared some words in the past. So he has to win this fight. Can't lose this fight, then win one more, and then be put back in the same position. This is a must-win situation, and that's why I feel like Diaz is kind of walking in there carefree. No one's really expecting him to win. If he loses, he's still a big deal. He's still a big draw. If Leon loses, oh my God, this whole winning streak is for naught. And there are a ton of guys like Vicente Luque and Michael Chiesa and Wonderboy Thompson and Gilbert Burns, all these names who are ready to take his spot at the top of the 170 ladder.
Brett, how do you view Edwards' approach to this fight, considering what's most likely at stake for him in terms of he wants to fight for the title? He has to win this fight.
He is so calm. He is so confident. I think that he's been in these spots before because he's used to it. He's used to this pressure of, hey, you got to win this fight because now you're on a 5-fight win streak, you're on a 6-fight win streak, you're on a 7-fight win streak. However, nobody is talking about you. In fact, most of these guys are at the top won't even fight you because there's just not much. There's not much of a reward for fighting you, Leon. I mean, you're very, very good. You're very, very dangerous. So, but beating you does nothing for these guys. That's why Colby Covington never wants to fight Leon Edwards. That's why Jorge Masvidal has never wanted to fight Leon Edwards. So he has been dealing with this pressure throughout this winning streak. And yes, it is heightened now because now here it is. It's his big shot. He's fighting a guy like Nate Diaz. But he knows in his mind and deep down, he has that true confidence that I am levels above Nate Diaz. I respect what he's done. I respect him as a competitor. I know he's going to be tough. I know he's not going to beat himself, but I am a champion in this weight class. I think he truly, truly believes that. So this is a situation where pressure and nerves could impact a fight, but I just don't see it right now from Leon Edwards, again, because he's kind of been in this position this whole time that if you lose, you're back to ground zero. You're back to fighting, the guys who are ranked in the 20s and 30s of this division because you already have a win streak and you can't fight the guys who are ranked higher than you because no one truly cares about you. This is his opportunity to get people to care, and I think if anything, he's enjoying it and he's motivated by it. He's not frightened by it.
Yeah, a lot of ramifications on the line for this bout that is not a title fight, but could very well determine who could fight for the title very soon. More from Brett and Ariel in a moment. But let's dive a little deeper into our main event because you go back when Israel Adesanya and Marvin Vettori, when they do step in the octagon Saturday there in Glendale, it'll feel like deja vu, right? Because Adesanya took on Vettori in just his second UFC fight back in April of 2018, and it proved to be one of his toughest tests to date. Many assume that these two may face each other again down the line after that, but who would have guessed that when they did it, it would be in the exact same arena, this time, though, with the UFC World Championship belt on the line. If you remember, if you don't, here's how it all went down back in April of 2018.
Live inside the Gila River Arena here in Glendale, Arizona, as bruising Italian Marvin Vettori senses opportunity for tonight. He draws arguably the single hottest prospect to hit the UFC in years, Israel Adesanya.
Good body shot.
And another
nice
one.
Body kick by Vettori.
Flurry at the end of round one.
Can't go cook him in the first. Fry him in the second.
Ooh.
Oh, Adesanya beautifully slips the offering from Vettori and lands a flush right.
If Vettori didn't respect him before the fight, he respects him now.
That was elbow.
Yeah.
Yep, that was legal.
Now Adesanya starting to showboat a little bit.
We have to win this round because the fight is really close.
Right now, you see Vettori, he's got to go in kill mode. He could be down 2 rounds. Now he's going desperate for the takedown.
We're seeing a hole in Adesanya's game here. This is honesty.
So for the first time in Israel Adesanya's career, he will need to rely on the judges.
I won. I'll see you again. I'll see you again.
For the winner by split decision, Israel, the last style bender.
A win's a win, but I'm not happy with it.
All right, as these men get set to run things back in the same arena as the first bout, let's take a look at some of the numbers from that night in 2018. Biggest takeaway here, Vettori only landing 2 takedowns. Now, if he's going to try to dethrone Adesanya, that number most likely we have to go up in his favor. As we bring Brett and Ariel back into the conversation here. And, you know, for Adesanya, like, look, he's coming off a loss, but for all intents and purposes, it's not a loss because it wasn't in this division, all right? We're talking about where he's the champion in this particular weight class. But, Ariel, how much of that going up and coming back down could impact this rematch against Vettori?
Well, it's funny that you say that because historically he's never had trouble making 185, but here we are 42 minutes in, and I was starting to get a little nervous. You know, when you go up and down, fighters have talked about this in the past. Roy Jones has talked about this in the past. You know, your body gets a little messed up. George St. Pierre has talked about this as well. And so I was starting to get nervous, like, hey, is he used to fighting at 205 now, even though he came under? He just did it back in March. So I reached out to his manager, Tim Simpson, and I said, how are we looking? And he initially said, we've got a huge crisis here. I don't think he's going to make weight. Now, I mean, Tim's a bit of a jokester, and he said, no, he just slept in, and he'll be there in 5 minutes. So we await the arrival of Izzy. I think he's going to be just fine. I think Izzy thrives in these situations. I think Izzy loves when people are counting him out. Remember, not that long ago after the Romero fight, everyone said that he was overhyped, that he couldn't pull the trigger, and he produced arguably his best performance in the UFC. That was the win over Paulo Costa. I think we're going to see a similar performance here. I think he recognizes that he's a level above Marvin Vettori. He likes the fact that people are doubting him a little bit. He likes the fact that Marvin thinks that he should have won the first fight. I think we're going to see vintage-style Bender on Saturday, a virtuoso performance out of him.
You know, Brett, you were there for the fireworks, if you will, the press conference yesterday. And because one thing we know about Israel Adesanya, he can easily get under the skin of his opponent. But the deal with Vettori is Vettori's still mad from the first fight because he thought he won, and he looks at all the success that Adesanya has. He's like, yo, I should be that guy. I should be the champion because I beat him that first time. How much emotion involved in this fight for Vettori, and could it be to his detriment rather than his benefit?
Hey, Michael, there's always emotion in a fight with Marvin Vettori, man. This guy, he only fights with passion, and I think he's getting a lot of fan attention because of that. You know, this idea of angry Marvin Vettori. It's just a really, really fun one. I mean, I personally love it. I love the way that this guy gets hyped up. I love the way that he knows it. You know, that he kind of smirks and that he turns into he goes a little Hulk smash here and there during fight week, and then of course in the fight itself. Now, can it be a detriment to him? Again, I think we were talking about it earlier that you know, as long as he keeps his composure within the fight, then it's fine. I mean, again, blowing up at a press conference, that's one thing. But if you do that during a fight, especially with a guy who is as skilled and as clever as Israel Adesanya, it could be a mistake. But again, I spoke to him right after that press conference, and he seemed calm, cool, and collected. Let's hear what he had to say.
I've been having the time of my life, man. I'm living my dream right now. You know, it's awesome. You know, in front of the crowd, and you know, I've been waiting for this moment. For this moment for a long time now, and I'm glad, you know, it went this way. And I truly don't like this guy, so everything is sweeter because of that, you know.
I mean, you've articulated this before, but I'll ask you again here. You say you don't like him. Why not? What don't you like about the guy?
He's just fake. Everything around him is fake. The story that he tells himself, the story that he's been told about himself, it's all fake, and I don't like fakeness. You know, that's about it.
Were you expecting the amount of boos when you walked out onto the stage today?
You know, I feel like a lot of people believe into this hype, you know, and that's what it is. You know, I had my people in the front, but they were more composed, and you know, the people behind they were more noisy, you know. But it is what it is. You know, at the end of the day, I'm going to go out and win, and then after I win, all these people are going to root for me.
I also asked you last week if we might see angry Marvin, and it looked like we saw angry Marvin out there on the stage. How angry and how genuine and authentic was your anger at that press conference?
No, very genuine, but, you know, you feel my heart right now, and it's probably like, you know, probably at like 60 heartbeat per minute. You know, I'm super cool, but, you know, he threw something at me, and I can't let you do that, you know.
What did he throw at you? I missed that. I was watching over here. I didn't get to see the video. Did he threw something at you?
It wasn't anything heavy, but it was a piece of paper or something, you know. But I just felt something, and I'm like, ain't gonna happen. And you know, so I reacted that way. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm all business, and I'm here just to become like the first Italian UFC champion, and I'm gonna do it. I believe it every day more.
Well, you hear that at the end, the confidence that he has, Michael, and I got to say that is what I'm going to be most intrigued by when this fight starts, because I have been impressed with Marvin's level of confidence. I mean, the guy knows that he's an underdog here. He told me that he's seen, you know, people on Instagram and even experts breaking this fight down saying that he's not going to win. He's like, I love it, keep saying it, because I'm going to surprise everybody. He has confidence. It comes across as very, very genuine. But if he goes into that fight and early in the first, second rounds, I want to see what his game plan is, and if it's not successful initially, what does that do to his confidence? Because, again, I've been a little bit surprised by just how confident the guy is going against a guy who looks like he could be an all-time great, Israel Adesanya, but can he maintain that confidence if it's not going his way early?
And again, split decision the first time they met back in 2018, Ariel, and it was a difficult win for Israel Adesanya. I wonder, in the wake of him going up to light heavyweight and losing to Jan Blachowicz and coming back down, is this the right fight for Israel Adesanya back at 185?
Absolutely, because, I mean, first of all, I think we're all kind of forgetting that Israel Adesanya is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters on the planet. With all due respect to Marvin Vettori, he's not quite there just yet. And so to come back and try to get back on track against the guy that you already beat early in your UFC career, who you think you're much better. I mean, Marvin has improved a lot since their first fight, but guess what? Izzy has improved a lot as well, and Izzy has fought better competition as well. What interests me a lot about this fight, and after we saw the press conference, I was starting to think about it. You know, we were showing that footage right over there. Marvin reminds me a lot of a young Michael Bisping, especially when Bisping was, you know, climbing the ladder at 185. Very emotional, very fired up. I mean, even him, you know, standing up and shouting there with the shaved head looked very reminiscent of a young Michael Bisping. And sometimes Bisping, in the early portion of his career, would let his emotions get the best of him. And, you know, he would make a mistake. He would stumble when he got to the top on the biggest stage. And then you see him fight against Luke Rockhold at 199, and you look at him in the buildup of that fight. He was very calm, very relaxed. He was playing with the house's money, and what happened? He knocked out Rockhold, and he finally tasted gold. I think it's a big mistake for Marvin to be acting this way. I know he feeds off of that energy. I know he likes to be fired up. I know we all kind of joke about angry Marvin. I enjoy it as well. I think he should go full heel on everyone, start cutting promos on America, Arizona, whatever. But I don't think you can be fighting that way with that kind of emotion against a striker like Israel Adesanya. Like, you come in and try to bum rush this guy, you're getting knocked out in 90 seconds. Now, Marvin, if he watches the first or the last fight that Izzy had against Jan Blachowicz and uses his takedowns, which have helped him tremendously throughout his career, some of the best takedown ratios in middleweight history, he'll have success. But if he's acting the way in which he acted yesterday in this fight on Saturday and starts going all crazy and bum rushes the guy, this is going to be a very short fight.
Yeah, only so many guys can bring that type of emotion right from the opening jump and be successful in the cage. I mean, if that's how Marvin's going to approach it, then I'm cool with it, because I'm with you, Ariel. I love all the antics. I love all the emotion, but I'm not fighting Israel Adesanya either. I'll be sitting in the studio watching the fight on television. We mentioned the fight against Blachowicz, Brett, and it was a loss on the official record for Israel Adesanya, but now he's moving back. Any impact whatsoever, that loss to Blachowicz trying to move up for Israel as he moves back down to his championship weight?
Yeah, I would say two things stand out about that. First off is that, you know, most of us, if not all of us, we kind of give Israel a pass, if you will, on that loss because, like you mentioned, it wasn't in his division. I mean, he's still the clear king of 185 pounds. He took that risk. He went up and fought a bigger man. But the big thing, one of the big takeaways from that fight was that he couldn't defend the takedown late, and then once he was taken down, he couldn't get off of his back. And I've talked to a lot of people, some coaches, some other fighters. Chris Weidman gave us a great breakdown of what was Israel doing off of his back, and is that a potential problem? And they did say that, you know, he's not showing much off of his back. And so it wasn't just that Israel lost to a bigger guy in Jan Blachowicz, but for the first time you looked at a loss and said, does he have a problem there? And so if Marvin Vettori can get him down and hold him down on the ground, does he have the skills? Does he have the know-how to get back up to his feet? Because that now looks like a path to victory that we really didn't know about. Even though Marvin Vettori had some success with takedowns in the first fight, that really reiterated it. It's very, very recent. It's very fresh in our memories that Jan was able to do that to Izzy. And the second thing that stands out to me about just the fact that Izzy coming off of a loss is maybe it creates a little bit more pressure, right? I mean, Israel Adesanya is going from a situation where, you know, he was basically one round away from being a UFC double champion, and we're talking, he's got 2 belts over his shoulders, and he's turning into a big superstar, which he already is a star for the UFC. But when you win a second championship, as we all know, you know, the John Jones thing, the back and forth that he had with John Jones, all of that stays alive. Now all of a sudden he's going to a situation where, hey, he could lose 2 fights in a row, and I do think that there is some pressure on that. Even though he's the big favorite here, he's coming off of a loss. He's coming from a situation where he's undefeated, going up in weight, and now all of a sudden, come Sunday morning, there is a possibility that he could have lost his last 2 fights. I do think that is a potential to add a little bit more pressure to his shoulders.
All right, Brett, good stuff there. And you mentioned something very important in the fight, and it was how that fight to Jan Blachowicz went down. UFC middleweight champion, as the UFC middleweight champion, pardon me, he's tasted defeat just once now because of that loss to Jan Blachowicz when he went up to 205. In this latest segment of Unlocking Victory, Gilbert Melendez and Dominic Cruz break down what Marvin Vettori may have learned to help him take the belt on Saturday.
What Vettori wants is this right here. Sit still and get into a brawl.
You guys are just phone booth fighting right now, right in the pocket.
Oh! Early knockdown for Marvin Vettori! Where he can sit still and hit his arms, hit his body, kick him. You saw Vettori throw a lot of head kicks, and he makes them miss. And getting back on pressure and landing your own, it slowly declines the offense of your opponent to where they shell up and they start biting on the fakes. See how he's biting? Hands come up, they fake the kicks, and they see the kick coming, and they start shelling up on the fake of the kicks. All that adds, and then slowly but surely, Stylebender can get his style going from the outside, piecing together combinations, landing all the offense that he wants to.
When you hit air, it's even more tiring than hitting the body. Ask any fighter out there.
Right now, Adesanya's making reads. He's letting Vettori miss so he can feel his offense.
So what he does very well is he uses his jab. His jab is key for everything. He closes the distance lightly with that jab. So he's gonna pump it a couple times, boom, boom, to crowd his opponent, okay? But it's important that when he pumps this jab forward, he doesn't walk into a punch and over lean forward. So I don't want to come forward and go into a straight from Adesanya. So what he does very well is he'll jab in a good stance, and he's trying to close that distance, but if that straight comes, he'll pull back and do a counter straight left of his own.
Adesanya 47, Vettori 43 and counting.
Or I push forward, I can't reach him here, but if I pump, I close the distance. Now I'm close. Now I can throw a punch, 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 and more importantly, lock up Israel Adesanya.
You see Vettori, he's got to go in kill mode. He could be down 2 rounds. Now he's going desperate for the takedown.
Adesanya did a great job here. He did the perfect thing. He hips in to stop me from going back. He hips right in on the, and he turns the hip, so he pulls this leg out of the way, right here. That's the first step. Vettori did the right thing, and he kept a hold of this leg even when Adesanya sprawls. Adesanya sprawls, he keeps a hold of this leg tight, and he just dumps it in. And that second move, Adesanya didn't deal with well. So what he could have done is you gotta win. So the right hand comes, hip in, we sprawl. Now right here, when this man grabs his hands together and keeps a hold of the leg, stuff the head and sprawl the hips. Right here, that was the last step. What happened is, he kept the single, and he stood up and pulled him right in, just like that.
All right, good stuff from Gil and Dominic there. Take a look at the current UFC middleweight rankings. Again, that one loss for Adesanya, though, came at light heavyweight, not at 185 pounds. Paulo Costa there. Last fight at 185 for Israel Adesanya, pretty impressive. But there you see Marvin Vettori, a rematch between these two guys. Vettori thinks, again, that he won the fight the first time they met. That was just the second time that Adesanya had fought in the UFC. So, Ariel, let me go back to you. We saw some of that technical stuff that Gilbert and Dominic broke down for us, but what we have to remember, too, with Marvin Vettori and Israel Adesanya, both fighters not the same fighters they were 3 years ago.
Yeah, but I think that there is a clear path to victory for Izzy, and there's also a path, or at least a blueprint, for Marvin Vettori to follow. And Marvin Vettori trains with a tremendous team in Huntington Beach. Kings MMA head coach Rafael Cordero. I mean, these guys are some of the best in the biz, and I think they will watch that first fight, or at least I should say the last fight between Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya, which happened just 3 months ago, and say, all right, here's the path. We need to try and take him down, and not just take him down. This is what Marvin does so well. He doesn't just take people down because he's not like your traditional wrestler. He takes you down and he frustrates you and he suffocates you and he inflicts damage. That's where he does his best work. And so he needs to do something akin to what he did against Kevin Holland. Of course, Izzy's a much different and better fighter than Kevin Holland, but that's the path to victory. You see it right over there, 53.7% takedown accuracy, and that's highest among active UFC middleweight. So that's really what he needs to stick to. And for Izzy, he needs to keep this fight standing. He needs to pick him apart. He needs to use his superior striking and he try to end this fight early. I don't think he wants to go into deep waters with Marvin Vettori, who, hasn't been in this spot before. But for me, it's all about getting in and getting out. And like I said, I'm expecting a big performance from Izzy. I think he has a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He likes when people are doubting him. He rises to the occasion historically throughout his career when he's coming off a loss. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And most important for Marvin, and especially his team, do not be overhyped in the cage. Do not fight emotionally. Don't fight personally. Go out there, stick to the game plan, do your thing. Good things will follow.
Brett, what do you say to the idea that sometimes a fighter can not be the best of himself because he's trying to duplicate what someone else did?
Yeah, I think that's a real thing, but I don't think that that's going to impact this fight because again, Marvin already did this back 3 years ago. And what was really interesting when I was doing that breakdown with Chris Weidman, who, is obviously one of the sharpest minds in this sport. He's done it himself at that weight class, of course. He told me that Marvin's takedowns were not even that great when he had success against Israel 3 years ago. That he was making a lot of technical mistakes as he was basically able to just kind of grab a hold of a leg and using his strength managed to take him down. But Chris was like, here's an opportunity where he could have gotten a takedown, and it just looked like to Chris that he didn't know what he was doing. Now, I talked to Rafael Cordero, Marvin's coach, yesterday, and he was very blunt about it. He said, I said, how do you beat this guy? You've been in the corner with Marvin against Israel Adesanya. You've been in the corner with Kelvin Gastelum, who was a teammate of Marvin Vettori. So Rafael Cordero has been in the corner twice against Israel Adesanya. How are you going to beat this guy? How are you going to make it? How are you going to get a victory over him this time? And he said, wrestling. We've worked on the wrestling. We've worked on the wrestling a lot. And that is a big key to me here is that Marvin Vettori was able to get Israel down 3 years ago when he didn't have the cleanest technique. If his technique is better, what does that look like? And if he's able to get some success again early, like Ariel said, I don't think that Israel wants to be in this long drawn-out fight with him. That's a lot of opportunities for Marvin to take him down and hold him down on the ground the same way we saw Jan did.
All right, let's go let's go to the scale now, Ariel. Looks like we have someone finally coming up, just a handful of guys left.
All right, next fighter to the scale is the man around whom this fight card was built. The undisputed UFC middleweight champion, the last style bender, Israel Adesanya.
All right, here he is. The reigning defending UFC middleweight champion. His manager telling me, no problem, just slept in a little bit. And he steps on the scale. For the first time as a middleweight since last year, September of last year, he defeated Paulo Costa.
183 and 1/2 pounds, the official weight for the champ, Israel Adesanya.
A svelte Israel Adesanya, who now made a habit out of coming in under the limit, always in good spirits. 183.5 for the Nigerian-born Israel Adesanya. So that means there are just 3 fighters left to weigh in. His teammate, Brad Riddell, who could be coming up in a matter of seconds here. I only say that because they're supremely close and tend to travel together. Steven Peterson. And the big one, the flyweight champion, Davison Figueiredo, the Brazilian. Of course, we saw Brandon Moreno. he successfully made weight. But that is a very important piece of information that we need to see unfold in front of our eyes. Izzy weighs in at 183.5. That seems pretty typical for him. Off the top of my head, I feel like he's weighed in at around that in the past. Sometimes you would say if someone comes in a pound and a half under, they overshot the weight cut. But with Izzy, I feel like it's much ado about nothing. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, of course, agree. Weight is just not going to be an issue for Izzy, which is what makes it remarkable that he went up and fought Jan Blachowicz. Didn't bring a pizza box to the scale this morning, but like you said, maybe he just slept in and came down. And look, again, guy's enjoying himself. I mentioned earlier that maybe there could be the potential of more pressure on him because he's coming off of a loss for the first time, but he sure doesn't seem to be showing any of that, right? Ariel, he looks very, very comfortable. He looks confident, and again, he looks like he's in great shape. And I just mentioned that a longer fight could potentially benefit Marvin because it gives him more of a chance to let the wrestling sink in. But Israel's cardio is always so phenomenal because he's so efficient. He's able to dictate, for the most part, where the fight goes, what pace it's at, especially if it's on the feet. So no cardio concerns for Israel, and he looked like he was in great shape. But that will be a big question if the wrestling starts to take over late in the fight, as it did for Jan Blachowicz when he fought at 205.
You know, you said a word there that piqued my interest, and it's a word that we've been talking about all week. You said confident, and it's very rare to have a situation like this where you have the champion going into a title defense off a loss, and the challenger is the one with the longer winning streak, Marvin Vettori, who's won 5 in a row. And what makes this so interesting, of course, the reason why Izzy's coming off a loss is because he moved up but he didn't lose the belt. But sometimes when you lose, when you suffer defeat, especially for the first time in your career, confidence is a little low. On the other hand, you have Marvin, who is never short on confidence, who is clearly feeling good about himself in his first title fight. And so I'm wondering if you think this will play out either for or against Izzy, for or against Marvin. When someone is coming off a loss, and yes, he didn't get knocked out, so it's not like the real blow to the ego, but it's still your first defeat in the sport of MMA, you tend to question yourself a little bit. You tend to be a little bit tentative. You tend to not really feel and act like yourself in the cage. On the flip side, you have the guy who not only is on the winning streak, but also thinks he deserved to beat you the first time they fought 3 years ago. You think that comes into play at all in this fight?
I don't from that standpoint of it. What I do think, if we look back on this fight and we second guess at all, how Israel was, there's another situation, right, that occurs after you lose, is that you want to get back in there right away. So I don't think necessarily the confidence is a huge thing for Israel. This is a great fight for him to come back to you, as you mentioned before, Ariel. He's beaten this guy before, so to be able to come back in, know that I know exactly what I'm getting into. I felt this guy. I'm familiar with him. I think all of those mental things Izzy is fine with, but maybe is there a possibility that after this fight we will look back and say he just took it too quick? He just fought Jan Blachowicz. It's not that he took damage in that fight, but to just jump right back into camp and to see him again now here in June. I mean, Marvin has kind of done the same thing. He's been very active, but we know that being a champion, it can be a mental toll. It can be a lot of pressure. It can be a lot of media. It can just exhaust you in a lot of different ways that you don't feel when you are a challenger. So I think that there's a potential for that he suffered a defeat. And just like any great fighter, he wanted to turn around and erase it right away. Maybe there was an opportunity there that he's pushing this fight a little bit too much. He's pushing the envelope. He's being a little too active. I don't think that will be the case, but it is worth noting. It is worth bringing up. We have seen that in the past, and the guy loses. He wants to come back too quickly.
By the way, one quick follow-up. I mentioned that I thought Izzy was under Marvin's skin a little bit because he was acting just a little too emotionally on Thursday at the press conference. Do you think that either Marvin is in Izzy's head a little bit because, Izzy was fired up as well, and you were there and got to, kind of witness firsthand what he was like after the press conference? Or B, do you think that he is underestimating Marvin because he doesn't feel, and he has said that Marvin's nowhere near him and as good as him and doesn't have the experience and hasn't fought the guys that he has fought, and that could be a problem come Saturday?
I think they're both very comfortable right now. I think they're handling it in their own ways with their own personalities. I mean, again, you can say that Marvin is a little concerning because of how fired up he is, but I believe him when he says, I've been working for this since I was 16 years old. I've wanted to fight for a UFC championship, so I am enjoying this, and this is how he enjoys himself. He does get fired up. He doesn't hold any of those emotions back. He feeds into them even more, and I think that if he wasn't doing that we would start to worry about him a little bit, because that's just how the guy is. And then for Izzy, he seems very comfortable with everything too. I mean, he's laughing at what Marvin says. I think that he prefers this buildup to what happened with Jan. Not that he would ever use that as an excuse or that it was a reason that he lost to Jan, but I mean, Ariel, when he fought Jan Blachowicz, I remember that press conference. It was in the Apex there in Vegas. It was very, 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 very low energy. There wasn't much to say back and forth. I mean, the whole appeal of that fight was just the fact that Israel's moving up in weight. Now you got the fans back. You've got an angry Italian guy who's yelling at you, who's jumping up at the press conference. I think that they're both very, very, very comfortable and happy with the circumstances. And you can hear it from Israel himself, because I got to speak to him after that heated press conference yesterday as well.
We haven't done this in a while, and when it's removed from you, you don't really realize how much you miss it till you're in it again. And I'm just like, yeah, this is dope. Even if they were booing for me, that's the thing. It's just energy you get to bask in, and yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
You kind of seem to thrive in this situation, right? Is this better for you this way?
100%, especially with a buffoon that's like this, you know. He's very emotional. It's good to poke the bear, if you will, you know. I mean, or the bull, if you will, because he's from Italy and I run on the bulls. So yeah, I like to do that once in a while, because I like to play with danger, but he doesn't pose any danger to me.
I like talking to you after these types of settings, because you're very almost philosophical in a way. You look at your opponents. I think that you try to take some things from them from time to time. Did you take anything from him today?
I mean, you see the way he reacted. I sat down because I know he's not a threat. I didn't even get up from my seat. I just looked at him and I was just laughing. It was amusing to me. And then with the fans all cheering, it's just energy. And then in these moments, 2 days removed from the fight, I can bask in it. But then when it gets closer to the fight, I get cold. And this is different when you talk to me after the weigh-ins. And then when you talk to me leading up to the fight, like hours before the fight, I'm more secluded. I go bush within.
All this stuff is great for selling pay-per-views, but does it do anything for you? Has it made this fight more personal, or does it change anything this week? I mean, again, it's great for the fan base, but does it do anything for you?
Nah, not really. For me, it's just business as usual. It's not personal. Like I said, to me, maybe if you asked me 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I'd have been like, yeah, it was annoying thinking like he thinks he won that fight, but now it's just amusing. I'm amused at the delusion that this guy's put himself on, and also it's good because I'm crazy myself, so you got two crazy motherfuckers in there who are going to do work, but one has vastly superior skills than the other, and you know who that is.
All right, so you tell me, Ariel, you asked the question, what did I think of Izzy and how he was handling, what Marvin was bringing to him? I think I know your answer, because you said you're expecting a great performance by Izzy, but the guy looked comfortable to me. What did you take from that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting how he talked about loving those moments and the energy and the press conference. You mentioned that as well. I think a lot of these fighters have been reminded over the past few months just how much they miss the fans and the buildup and how that allows them to rise to the occasion. I'm not suggesting that the reason he lost that fight against Jan Blachowicz was because there were no fans, but I do think it often helps the fighters perform at a different level. So I think both guys, as you said, are comfortable in their own skin. I just get a little worried when you start acting a little too crazy at the press conference, because then I wonder, the press conference is the press conference, but does that mean you'll act too emotionally come Saturday night? And that usually leads to problems. We've seen time and again guys who act too emotionally, who throw out the game plan, who bum rush their opponent, bad things happen to them. We're about to find out in about 36 hours. And it's interesting because there's bad blood between those two guys. There's no bad blood, it seems, between Nathan Diaz and Leon Edwards. And we saw that there's some bad blood between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno at the press conference as well. Figueiredo kind of, getting out of his character a little bit, pushing Moreno. So I'm looking forward to seeing Deiveson Figueiredo here as we approach 50 minutes left, Michael, in the weigh-ins. One of just 3 fighters left to weigh in, the flyweight champion, kind of doing a bit of a no-no there by pushing his opponent. And I was told afterwards that Moreno was very fired up and very upset that he pushed him at the end of their stare down. We'll see what that all translates into come Saturday night.
Yeah, and also see what the weight for Figueiredo is when he steps to the scales here momentarily. Let's go back in time a little bit, because it seemed as if the UFC's last fight card on Fight Island there in Abu Dhabi was destined for failure, if you remember, right? With draws by welterweight champ Kamaru Usman, women's featherweight champ Amanda Nunes, left Dana White and company kind of reeling. Stepping up to the helm, though, was Deiveson Figueiredo, who put his flyweight title on the line against rising prospect and underdog Brandon Moreno. Figueiredo and Moreno both fought less than a month before their scheduled bout at UFC 255. So expectations for a good fight, not that high. However, by the end of the night, all of MMA was talking about that fight.
Main event for UFC 256 for the undisputed UFC Flyweight Championship of the World. Davison Figueiredo versus the #1 contender, Brandon Moreno.
Se ele acha que me ganha, se ele acha que vai tirar tudo de mim, isso a gente vai ver dentro do octógono.
Right now I feel so happy and so proud about what I'm doing in this sport for my country.
He's here to fight, man. What a pace this fight has been done. Just keep moving forward. These boys are going at it. We got ourselves a fight, gentlemen. Yeah.
To it here, Figueiredo back.
Oh my goodness! Wins again! Oh my goodness! Oh man, he is just winging these punches.
12 minutes down, 5 to go.
My God, what a fight!
Ladies and gentlemen, this fight is a majority draw. And still, the undisputed UFC Flyweight.
Yeah, that was it. December, UFC 256, undisputed Flyweight Championship on the line. And all Figueiredo and Moreno did was put together one of the best fights we've seen. Moreno, the challenger, he gave the champion all he had. Landed 132 significant strikes over the course of that fight. Currently sits at the third most 6 strikes landed in a 5-round UFC Flyweight bout. However, Figueiredo able to withstand all Moreno threw at him and raise the bar even higher. He landed 137 significant strikes of his own. That's the most in a 5-round UFC Flyweight bout. At the end of the 25-minute war, a staggering 267 combined significant strikes were landed by these two competitors. That stands as a 5-round UFC Flyweight fight record. How impressive was that? Wow. Those dudes were going at it, and fight fans loved it everywhere. And now we bring in Brett and Ariel once again. And the problem with such a great fight, Ariel, as I start with you, is that you expect the next one to be even better. It's really hard for the rematch to live up to the first fight if that first fight was epic. So with that being said, what we're going to see tomorrow night?
Well, you know, with these two guys and the way they fight and their output and the fact that the first fight happened on 3 weeks' notice for both of them, they both had just 3 weeks to prepare. Figueiredo couldn't even go home. He couldn't even go sleep in his bed. He had to stay in Las Vegas. I actually think there's a chance the second fight could be better. And, you know, historically, we have seen some sequels here and there be better than the original. Of course, Back to the Future 2, in my opinion, was better than Back to the Future 1. Home Alone 2, some might say better than Home Alone 1. So there have been some instances where the sequel is better than the first. These two guys produced such a great fight. I'm assuming if you are watching this show right now, you have seen the first fight. If you're one of the few who hasn't, here are some highlights. They fought in the phone booth. The action never stopped. It was amazing. We had it all, including some low blows, including some point deductions, which led to the draw, of course. Everything was thrown out there in that cage at the Apex in December. It was truly a marvel to watch this fight. I think we'll see a better Davison Figueiredo. Hopefully he makes weight. 46 minutes to go. Hopefully we'll see a better Brandon Moreno as well, because he had more time, of course, to prepare. And I just love the backstory. I love everything about these guys. Davison Figueiredo, the former hairstylist, the former taxi driver, the former sushi chef, against the guy who comes from a family who makes piñatas in Tijuana, who collects Legos and Funko Pop dolls. I mean, these guys, you would never suspect that they would turn into great MMA fighters. And I also love the fact that the whole narrative about the flyweight division is no more, that we're not talking about whether it should stay or go. Here are two flyweights who aren't maybe the biggest names in the sport, but have been given prime real estate under Israel Adesanya and above Nathan Diaz, right there, co-main event spot, and they've earned it and they deserve it, and no one's questioning their place, not only on the card, but in the company as well. It's beautiful for longtime fans of the sport.
You know, Brett, we often judge fights based on expectations, right? It's human nature. And if you go back to the first bout, it wasn't that much expectation because of the short notice of both fighters going into that bout. But now there is expectation because the first fight was so good and they've had so much more time to prepare for the rematch. So with all that said, and based on what Ariel brought to the table, what's your expectation for this bout?
Well, I also think that the big change in expectations is from Brandon Moreno. I mean, if you go back to last December, we were all kind of thinking that was going to be a quick fight for Deiveson Figueiredo just because that's what he had been doing. I mean, the guy had put together one of the most impressive campaigns of 2020. He'd been finishing guys very early. Not only had he been finishing them, he'd been finishing them in dominant, devastating fashion. I mean, the knockouts of Joseph Benavidez, the quick submission before Alex Perez even knew what was happening to him. So he went in, kind of as this juggernaut monster, and he said, hey, Brandon Moreno is a good fighter, but this guy is just something else. And so the change in expectation now is that, hey, Brandon Moreno, man, he can take Deiveson Figueiredo's best shot. Figueiredo, you talked about those stats, all those punches that these guys landed. He never got Moreno out of there. So if a guy can stay in there and take Figueiredo's best shot, and now Moreno has been in there with him, has been able to make some adjustments, can he actually beat this guy? I mean, that is the biggest difference. The first time we were expecting a dominant performance, kind of it's always the easy one to go to, but the Mike Tyson type thing. How quick is he going to get this guy out of there? Now we're expecting a very competitive fight, and I'll tell you what, man, Brandon Moreno, he went into that fight in December sort of just as a challenger. Now I think he goes in as a guy who the UFC wouldn't mind seeing Brandon Moreno win a title. They wouldn't mind seeing this guy who is very articulate, who works on the UFC broadcasts, who commands that respect and that support from not only fans around the world, but specifically in Mexico where he was born. All of a sudden, Brandon Moreno, it's just he's coming into this fight with a lot of different expectations on him and just a completely different sort of perspective of who this guy is in the sport, facing, again, a guy who is still a monster in Figueiredo.
Well, Brett, to follow that up, because clearly if you're Moreno, you have to have even more confidence going into this bout than you did the first one based on what you did when you did face Figueiredo there in the cage, and maybe some doubt, if any, for Figueiredo because he realizes how good Moreno is because he couldn't finish him when they fought the first time.
You would think that, but I'll tell you why that is not the case here with Figueiredo. I actually think that Figueiredo is going in with even more confidence this time because he looks back on that fight and said everything went horribly for me. I had to turn around. Like Ariel said, I couldn't go back to Brazil. It was around Christmas time. I didn't know I was going to be fighting in December. I knew I was going to be fighting in November, and then they needed a main event, so I got to stay in Las Vegas. And then he was hospitalized the week of the fight with stomach issues. He got a point deduction, which, hey, it was a hard low blow. I don't fault referee Jason Herzog for taking a point there, but that's sort of one of those gray areas. You don't know if the referee's going to take a point there or not. He happened to, and the guy still walked away with a draw. So I think if you're Figueiredo, you're like, hey, I lost a point. I was hospitalized the week of the fight. How much worse can things get? So as long as he gets on this scale in the next, whatever it is, 30 minutes, and he looks okay, and he can rehydrate, and he can feel physically well going into this fight, I think mentally he's going to be just fine.
Ariel, what's your take on that narrative that I threw at Brett?
Yeah, no, I do think there is something to that. I mean, again, we were just talking about the fact that here's a guy who had trouble with making weight earlier in 2020 and then had to make 125 twice in the span of 3 weeks. That's a massive ask. Now, I know people will say Brandon Moreno had to do the same. The difference is Moreno doesn't have trouble making 125. Witness the fact that we saw Moreno very early on in this weigh-in show. And so, yeah, that was a really big deal. I'm sure he was supremely tired, and I'm sure that's why we're going to see a better version of him come Saturday. It's been 6 months, a little over 6 months since that last fight, since that first fight between the two of them. And so both guys were probably tired, but I think if you had to really try to determine, all right, who was at a disadvantage given the circumstances, 3 weeks notice, making weight twice, all that, I think without a doubt it's Deiveson Figueiredo. So that's why I'm really curious. And I was talking to his manager earlier in the week, Walid Ismail again, and he was saying, like, man, that guy, he was sick. He had to go to the hospital before. Like, that guy, if you think that's the best version of Figueiredo, if you think that Brandon Moreno is on his level, you guys are all in for a rude awakening. That guy is going to remind all of you that he is way better than Brandon Moreno. I can't wait to see if he is actually telling the truth.
Ariel, I want to get your take on a point that Brett raised as well as it relates to Moreno, because he is very popular. The UFC would love to have him as a champion. Not to say they want him to win the fight, but if he does win the championship, they would love the opportunity to market him as a champion. We've seen the country of Mexico really prop up boxing for a long time with so many great fighters to come from Mexico and be champions for, several years. What would it mean to the UFC to have a Mexican-born fighter like Brandon Moreno be a UFC champion?
Oh, it would be a huge deal. They've had some success with Mexican-born fighters over the years. And, of course, Cain Velasquez, a Mexican-American, was the UFC heavyweight champion. But they haven't been able to find that, one big true star that they could really get behind. And we all know if you can find that one big true star, that can open you up in a particular market. And we all know how much Mexico loves its combat sports. So there are some great Mexican fighters in the UFC right now. Alexa Grasso comes to mind. Irene Aldana comes to mind as well. But this man has an opportunity to be a really big-time star. A man who Cesar Chavez and all the great Mexican boxers of yesteryear. And what a big opportunity he has here to be the face of Mexican MMA. No one has really taken that mantle just yet. This could be the guy. And again, what a great backstory. A guy who grew up with a family who makes piñatas till this day, who grew up in the border town of Tijuana, Mexico, who was cut from the UFC when the UFC said, you know what, maybe we're not going to go ahead with the flyweight division, who works his way back up, and not just works his way back up, but works his way back up to a title shot, and then fights to a draw, and then gets the rematch, and then potentially wins the belt. So it's a beautiful story. He's such a likable guy. He's such a friendly guy. And what a great moment yesterday where you have the star, the superstar, the icon, Nathan Diaz, who is of Hispanic descent, give the fist bump to Brandon Moreno, almost kind of saying like, this is one of us. This is our guy. You guys, if you like me, you should support this guy as well. Brandon Moreno could be a big-time star for the UFC if he could get over the hump tomorrow night.
Well, what we also saw yesterday from Brandon Moreno was a little bit of altercation with Diaz and Figueiredo. Brett, you were there for that, and we talked about the fireworks between Vettori and Adesanya, but when they had the face-off, this was a little unexpected in this bout, right?
It was a little unexpected that Davison shoved him. I mean, Davison has been saying that, he doesn't appreciate some of the things that Brandon says. He doesn't appreciate some of, Brandon maybe doesn't completely believe some of the hardships that Davison went through the first time. I think Davison also, in a way, is just a guy who likes to build himself up in this manner. There are certain guys who don't need to feel animosity. There are certain guys who don't need to feel passion. And then there are other guys who kind of feed off of it. I think Davison likes to be kind of the bully during a fight week. It kind of plays into his personality that I've seen in the past. So in that regard, it wasn't completely surprising. But I will say that Brandon, I mean, the one thing about this guy's personality, man, he's just he's over the top, happy all the time. He's joyful. He's like a little kid sometimes when you're around him. He was very, very angry that Davison shoved him. Once he walked in the back behind the curtain, he stormed off and he was muttering some things under his breath that guy's going to pay for it. He's a guy who respects his opponents. He's here for the sport of it, maybe not so much the entertainment side of it. I think that did bother him a little bit and maybe give him just a little bit of extra motivation that Davison would do that to him. I think he thought it was unprofessional.
Yeah, unprofessional, maybe even felt, disrespected, Ariel, because looking at it, what I saw, it's not as if Brandon Moreno said something. He didn't wink at him. He didn't blow him a kiss, and just all of a sudden he pushes him in the chest. I'm not sure what that exactly says about Diaz and Figueiredo in that moment. If it's real, then you question. If it was fake, you'd be like, why are you doing it then?
Well, yeah, no, I think it actually says a lot. I think, to me, again, not something that Figueiredo usually has done in the past. Here's a guy who fought Moreno 6 months ago. It went to a draw. Moreno is, I think, very confident going into this fight because, he went the distance and almost beat the champion. And what it said to me was, here's Figueiredo with maybe one last chance. They're gonna square off later today as well, but one of the final chances to get him off his game, to get him fired up. Like, to me, that was, I don't want to say a desperate attempt, but that to me was Figueiredo being like, hey, I need to do something to knock this guy's confidence down a few notches. And so I didn't like that from the champ. The champ shouldn't be doing that sort of thing. The challenger, Vettori, Adesanya, for example, that's where you usually see it. So again, maybe we're just here, filling time and making, a mountain out of a molehill, but I don't like to see that sort of behavior from a champion, because to me, that makes me feel like the champion is questioning himself and the champion is worried about the challenger a little too much. And thus he's trying to get the challenger to, get off his game. When you saw yesterday, Moreno was in pretty good spirits and loving the attention from the crowd as well. He was clearly the fan favorite of the two.
Yeah, that was it was a bad look for the champ, as you said, Figueiredo there. And if I'm Brandon Moreno, it's like, oh, he's bothered, so maybe I do have the upper hand. Or maybe I'm living in his mind rent-free right now, as the kids like to say. And maybe that could work to his advantage. But one thing we know for sure right now is we don't know what Deiveson Figueiredo weighs because he's not come to the scale. Waiting for that, he's got about, 35 more minutes before he can step to the scale to give his official weigh-in here for UFC 263. But Ariel, while we wait for that, you mentioned earlier that this could be the last fight on this card for a particular legend of the UFC who has never fought, who's never won the title, pardon me, but has won the hearts of so many UFC fans throughout the years. What are you making of the last opportunity potentially that we will see my man Maia in the cage?
Yeah, there's a part of me that wishes this was the main event on some fight night so we could just kind of pay tribute to Demian Maia if this is in fact his last fight. And like I said, last fight on his UFC deal, but he's getting up there in age and suffered a tough loss last year, and clearly the end is near. Demian Maia is on that short list of best fighters to never win a UFC title. Luckily for him, he got to fight for the belt twice, once at 185 in a bizarre fight against Anderson Silva back at UFC. What was it? It was in 2010, 112 in Abu Dhabi, and then of course against Tyron Woodley a few years ago in Anaheim. But again, like I said, always handled himself with class, professionalism, one of the best fighters on the ground, one of the greatest BJJ practitioners in the history of the sport. And here he is in an opportunity when, by the way, the UFC, I felt, was kind of trying to kill him off against a guy like Khamzat Chimaev. Didn't like that fight at all. Felt like a mismatch. Felt like he deserved a little better, a little more respect on the way out. So I think an appropriate fight against a Bilal Muhammad, big opportunity for Muhammad. Look, it's the circle of life in combat sports. Same as it is in boxing, same as it is in pro wrestling. At some point, promoters try to build a name off a legend. And so they're trying to build Muhammad off of Maia. But I do think they're a lot more evenly matched than, say, Khamzat Chimaev and Maia were. So I like the fight. I think it's an appropriate fight. But yeah, it's a bummer when you're starting to see a lot of these older guys, these legends of the game, sail off into the sunset. And I hope for Maia's sake he gets to represent himself and get a great performance out there, win or lose, that he gets to go out on his terms with his head held high.
Yeah. I mean, Maia is an interesting one, and it's one of those ones where it's you like to see where he's at when he's talking about retirement, because he's not in a position where we've seen some other guys where they're just on this losing streak. They've been knocked out multiple times. I mean, Demian Maia, part of the reason that, perhaps that the Khamzat Chimaev fight would have made sense is that the guy is still ranked. He has won 3 of his last 4 fights. In 2019, he had a great year. He went 3-0 in 2019. Then he lost to Gilbert Burns, but there's no shame in losing to Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns is right there in terms of title contention. So this is the type of situation that you kind of want to see, where a guy's talking about the end, but he's not being forced out the door. He can end it on his terms. I think he did want to fight again in 2020. There were a few things thrown out in addition to Chimaev. They talked about Vicente Luque. But I think Maia, he is having a hard time deciding whether or not this is it, clearly. I mean, he has stated in the past he only has one more. He talked about fighting a Donald Cerrone. He talked about fighting a Diego Sanchez. And now all of a sudden he's like, I don't know. I don't know if this is my last one. I don't know if I'd fight outside of the UFC. I don't know if I'd want to sign another contract with the UFC. He's taking it fight by fight, which of course he has the ability to do so. But while he's still here and relevant, he's going to be facing the guys like a Bilal Muhammad, who's ranked just slightly below him. I like the matchup. I like it for a lot of different reasons. I think it's a fight that makes sense, and it will be interesting to see where Maia goes, because again, this is the last fight on his contract, and he hasn't stated one way or another. I guess it just comes down to his performance on Saturday, and that we'll know a lot more after that.
Just taking a step back, Brett, do you think the UFC should have booked Muhammad Edwards 2? Do you feel, that was what Bilal was pushing for, right? He really wanted the rematch. Do you feel, you're shaking your head, why not?
Oh, I mean, because that fight came together because of Leon Edwards' bad luck, right? I mean, poor Leon Edwards has had the worst luck in the world, and we've been saying it, forever, and hopefully we'll stop saying it after Saturday, because he will have finally gotten that big fight. But he was supposed to fight Khamzat Chimaev. How many times did that fight fall apart? That was going to be a big fight. That was going to be, either Khamzat, proves that he's a guy who can win a welterweight championship, or Leon Edwards, finally gets that experience and that big name, all the attention, and then he moves on to bigger and better things. It was super unfortunate unfortunate what happened between him and Belal. It was Leon's fault, so you can't fault Belal for any of it. You feel bad for Belal that it ended in that way, and he kind of didn't feel like he really got the full opportunity of what that was. But you don't hold up Leon now and redo that fight when quite frankly, it just didn't make sense the first time. The only reason it was thrown together is because Khamzat Chimaev fell out. Leon Edwards deserves a bigger fight, with all due respect, than Belal Muhammad. He deserves to be in the spot that he's in, fighting Nate Diaz and then potentially fighting for a championship after.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. A tough turn of events, but I also think that if the fight was going differently, if Belal was winning that fight and then got poked, then I think you can make a strong case. In this case, I thought Leon Edwards looked great in that first round. I think he clearly won the first round. I think he looked pretty good in the early portion of that second round before the eye poke. And I just think that, yeah, it's just tough luck. He got the big opportunity. It's tough luck. And I don't think for a second that Leon Edwards did that on purpose in order to try and get out of that fight. I don't think that was intentional whatsoever. But here's an opportunity as you look at the rankings. Look, Muhammad's right there. A legend like Maia. He's never beaten a guy like Maia before with a name like Maia has, with a resume like Maia has. All of a sudden, I'm not saying you get to jump up all those spots, but usually that's kind of the way it goes. You know, now you're starting to talk about the Neil Magny's of the world and all that stuff. So this is a massive opportunity for Belal, a guy who's had his own kind of bad luck and who hasn't been able to, you know, go on a long active streak, if you will. Really think that this is an interesting fight, and maybe we'll get some clarity in terms of Maia's his future plans after this. I reached out to his team earlier in the week. His manager, the great Eduardo Alonso, who's been by his side for many, many years, also Shogun Rua's side, and he said they haven't really talked about it. There's no real clarity, unless he's stonewalling me, which, you know, he could be, and that's his prerogative. No real clarity as to what Maia is going to do next, and maybe if he has a great performance, he'll stick around. What we've seen from a lot of the older guys who have been fighting towards the end of their contract is they lose and then they walk away or they part ways. If Maia can get a big win here over Muhammad, maybe it changes his mind. Maybe he reconsiders. Maybe he sticks around for one or two more fights.
Yeah. I think I don't think Eduardo's lying to you at all. I spoke to Eduardo as well this week. I spoke to Damian. Right now he's focused on tying Donald Cerrone for the most wins in UFC history, which is remarkable, right, Ariel? I mean, Donald Cerrone gets that credit. I don't think Damian Maia gets that credit. Damian Maia, with a win on Saturday, will be tied for the most wins ever in the promotion, the UFC's history. That is incredible. And if you ask the majority of fans who's the most winningest fighter in UFC history, they might say George St. Pierre, they might say Anderson Silva, they might say Donald Cerrone. I can guarantee you most of them are not saying Damian Maia. So this guy has had an absolutely incredible career. If he goes out and he wins and beats Belal's ranked number 12, I mean, it just shows that this guy at 44 years old still has a lot left in the tank. And the guy who is a competitor like him, it would not surprise me if he goes out and has a good performance to re-sign with the UFC. Maybe, not take a super high amount of fights per year, but take the fights that make sense. Maybe someone falls out. Maybe he can fight somebody who's higher ranked than him. I know that sometimes he wishes he would fight higher ranked guys. It always kind of seems like Damian Maia is the guy who's defending his perch in the top 10, that the UFC is always trying to bring somebody up, and it's an opportunity for them, but not as much as Maia. So who knows, man? But if he looks good on Saturday, it would not surprise me at all if he wants to stay in the UFC and the UFC says, yeah, we like to keep you around.
10:33 p.m. Eastern Time, 10:33 a.m. Pacific, which means we have 27 minutes left for the weigh-ins, and we are still awaiting the arrival of three fighters: Steven Peterson, Brad Riddell, and the big one, Deiveson Figueiredo, who we have said multiple times on this show has had some issues in the past with making weight. He, of course, the UFC Flyweight champion, his opponent, Brandon Moreno, one of the first to the scale, and all other 25 fighters who have stepped on the scale have made weight without any incident. No retries, no hoop of shame, none of that. So a pretty good start, but it's starting to get a little tense here. We're talking about Maia and Muhammad. That's a fight that maybe is flying under the radar because of the top three fights on the card getting so much attention. Another fight that I think is flying under the radar, and another fight that could have some serious title implications for its respective division and weight class. It's the fight between Lauren Murphy and Joanne Calderwood. Murphy has looked really good as of late, unbeaten in her last four. She's really put it all together after a rough patch in her UFC career, now training out of Houston with the great Derek Lewis. Joanne Calderwood was supposed to fight for the belt in June of 2020. The pandemic and a subsequent Valentina Shevchenko knee injury delayed that fight, and then she wanted to be active, and she took a fight against Jennifer Maia, and she rolled the dice, and she lost that fight, and thus Jennifer Maia got the title shot against Valentina Shevchenko and ended up losing that title fight back in November. Who, in your opinion, and I know it's a tough spot because there's a big gap between Valentina and the rest of the division, but I think this is, even though they haven't said it, a number one contender fight because there aren't a ton of other options out there, especially after Jessica Andrade just lost. Who, in your opinion, has a better chance of giving Valentina Shevchenko a tougher fight, if she gets out of this fight and then fights for the belt next?
Yeah, that is a tough question because obviously Valentina is just so dominant. But I would probably have to go with Joanne Calderwood, and the reason I would is that I just think she has a little bit more finishing prowess than Lauren Murphy. I think what Lauren has done, in her current winning streak has been it's been unexpected. It's been really admirable. I think that just mentally she's really fallen into this great place, and she is maximizing all of her potential. But I do still think at the end of the day, if someone's going to finish a fight, I'm going to put more money on Joanne Calderwood than Lauren Murphy. And I think if anyone's going to upset Valentina in this flyweight division, they're going to have to finish her. I just don't see any of these women out-fighting Valentina Shevchenko over the course, the majority of 25 minutes. So if I'm looking for a finish, I'm looking for Joanne Calderwood a little bit over Lauren Murphy. But, who knows if Joanne will get there, because Lauren Murphy is a tough task here. I think that she's the underdog to Joanne Calderwood, but this is a close pick-em fight for me. Either one of these ladies could win this on Saturday.
Yeah, and like a fine wine, she has aged very well. Lauren Murphy, she's 37, so approaching the tail end of her career, but showing no signs at all of slowing down. In fact, you can make a very strong case this is the best stretch of her career. There was a time where she lost 4 of 6, and so she was really a non-factor at 135, 125, and now here she is, unbeaten in the last 4. I really like her confidence as of late. I really think you see her in the cage, you listen to her interviews. This woman truly is believing that she is worthy of a title shot and that she could be the one to beat Valentina Shevchenko. Now, I think the gap between Shevchenko and the rest of the division at 125 is the biggest gap of any division between champion and challengers in the UFC, and that includes Amanda Nunes at 135 and 145. It's just that big. But man, Lauren Murphy has looked really, really good, and she has shown a killer instinct. In this 4-fight unbeaten streak, 2 of those wins have come via finish. So I'm really looking forward to this fight. And again, a byproduct, and it's a good problem, of the stacked main card. We're not talking enough about a potential number one contender. Maybe if the UFC came out and build this as a number one contender, we'd be talking about it more. But I feel like it's flying under the radar. And I'd be lying, Brett, if I didn't say there's a part of me who, feels bad for Joanne Calderwood. She rolled the dice. She had the title shot. How often have we seen this before? He had the title shot and said, I just don't want to wait. I want to be active. Didn't fight for a while. I want to make money. And then she stumbled. And like I said, when she stepped on the scale, one of the most beloved fighters in the sport, no one says a bad word, much like Maia, no one speaks, poorly on Joanne Calderwood. So it would be nice for her to finally get that title shot to right that wrong. But, to me, it's a fascinating matchup, and 125 needs, we looked at the rankings just there. Shevchenko has fought and beaten most of those except for Cynthia Calvillo, who's coming back against Andrade. She needs a fresh opponent, and to me, it just seems like an obvious that this would be the number one contender fight. This would be the fight that would produce her next challenger.
Yeah, in a weird way, Ariel. I mean, of course, I sympathize with JoJo and the way she took that fight, happened to lose it, lost a guaranteed title shot. She could have, can all these ladies at 125, can they just wait? Can they just wait? Because eventually they're going to get a title shot anyway, because Valentina's just going to keep rolling right through all of them. In a strange way, and I know that this is not how the sport works, and I'm happy that these two are fighting, Lauren Murphy and Joanne Calderwood, but you could just cancel this fight and say, hey, Lauren Murphy gets Valentina in 2 months, and JoJo gets her in 4 months. Until somebody shows that they can be even competitive with Valentina Shevchenko, you need challengers. So, the one thing that going in JoJo's favor, I suppose, is that even though she lost that fight, it's not going to take many wins to get back into a title fight because Valentina's just churning through them so fast, and you want to see new challenges. You don't want to see the same repeated challenges. So I think one way or another, I think there's a good chance that both of these women will eventually fight Valentina Shevchenko just out of necessity because she needs opponents.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. You know, again, stacked top 3 fights, stacked main card, if you will. 14 fights on the entire card, and we are approaching 1:40 p.m. Eastern time, which means 20 minutes left. Still awaiting the arrival of Deiveson Figueiredo, Steven Peterson, and Brad Riddell. Is there any other fight that we haven't paid attention to? Any other name, prospect? You got the undefeated Jamal Hill going up against Paul Craig. Brad Riddell, Drew Dober is a really interesting fight. Of course, we hope to see Brad Riddell in the coming minutes. Darren Stewart versus Eric Anders has all the makings of a really fun fight at 185 pounds as well. Hakeem Dawodu against Movsar Evloev is a really interesting fight between two 145-pound prospects. Any other fight that really catches your eye, or perhaps fighter? You know, you got Chase Hooper returning as well. That really catches your eye.
No, I think you mentioned it there at the end, actually. Movsar Evloev and Hakeem Dawodu. I think that stylistically it's a great fight. I think it's two guys who have shown a lot of potential who have not gotten a lot of recognition for it. But hey, you look at this bout sheet, and they are number 15 and number 14 in that division. And the winner could have an opportunity to potentially break the top 10. Probably not just squeeze in there quite yet, but it's an important fight for both of these guys because I do think both of these guys have the potential to get into the top 10 and then also be competitive in there. But, you know, as you know, Ariel, and the sport knows, it's hard to break into the top 10, not only just to gather the wins, but it's hard to supplant somebody and kick them out of the top 10. So this is a big fight for both of those guys if they want the recognition, if they want the bigger fights, and I do think that both of them have the skills to back it up. So one of these two is going to take a step forward, and the other one's going to have to keep just churning along and picking up wins.
I'll highlight the Jamal Hill Paul Craig fight, which is starting off the main card. We saw some bad blood between them, a little run-in at the hotel earlier in the week. Anytime you have an undefeated prospect who looks as good as Jamal Hill has looked as of late, the standing TKO win over Ovince St. Preux, his last fight, supremely impressive. And Paul Craig is always involved in fun fights, entertaining fights. Oftentimes, wacky things tend to happen when Paul Craig is fighting. I'm really looking forward to that fight at 205 pounds. It is 1:42 p.m. Eastern. This is when it gets fun, Michael. This is when the theater and the drama really comes into play. Again, oh, wow. We're even breaking out the clock. I don't know if I've seen the clock before, at least not recently. Now we're starting to get fun here. This is let's unbutton our top button here, Michael. 17 minutes to go. Deiveson Figueiredo, Brad Riddell, Steven Peterson. Now it's starting to get interesting, my friend.
Yeah, starting to get interesting to say the least, especially when one of the remaining fighters to step on the scale is a current champion, as in Deiveson Figueiredo, as he gets set to put his belt up against Brandon Moreno for a second time. And remember how good that fight was the first time, and we've talked a little bit about it, but in this latest edition of Unlocking Victory, we have Dominic Cruz and Gilbert Melendez go even deeper inside that epic battle to tell you what to expect for the rematch coming up tomorrow night at UFC 263.
This is where Moreno's very tricky. He stays here, and then he fires left hooks. He's got a super quick jab. He stays here, waits, in, out, jab. Yes. And then as we see here, this was the difference. When Moreno would throw a jab or a hook, Figueiredo would just lean, and he would make him miss. And he couldn't quite hit him. He was just out of range because he would just lean out of the way. What we can see differences, inside kicks from Moreno. Throw the right hand, but throw it to the body. If you're scared to headhunt because Figueiredo's countering you, throw your jab, get him to lean. When he leans, follow to the right, follow left, follow to the body. Finish your combination, keep the jab going. So to make this fight different, Moreno's got to throw more right hands, more right side, more right of his body needs to be used, not just the left. He can do that by getting him to bite on the jab and lean, follow to the body. Lean, inside kick. Right when you see Figueiredo lean, that opens him up for the rest of the combination. That way he can use the same weapons, but now he can set up his right side of his body. Anytime Figueiredo counters the first movement, follow up with body attacks, follow up with right side attacks. That will change this fight in a lot of ways.
I'm Deiveson Figueiredo. If you kind of notice, he kind of sits back and he's going forward. He's going forward, walking his opponent down, kind of waiting for them. There's a difference between me walking forward on my back heel than me walking forward this way. Now, if she punches me here, there's really not much room for me to get off, but since I'm on my back heel, again, she punches me, I'm out. He's more of an offensive, aggressive guy. So from this position here, jabbing hard and kind of pulling out, sticking that jab hard, controlling the distance and really putting some pressure on his opponent, and these jabs hurt.
Oh, look at that jab. Figueiredo's jab is like a right hand.
But as you notice, when he jabs, he kind of pulls back and level changes. He's looking to set up the right uppercut or an overhand right, which is a little bit different than the normal way people do it. So as I jab, stick that jab, I'm looking for that reaction. Jab, here comes the jab reaction. You'll see him squat, he level change. He's looking for this big right uppercut, or he'll level change here and come back over top with an overhand right. Once he kind of has that going, he may square it up a little bit. Now he's in the square position. What's he looking to do here? As someone jabs me, he's looking to parry this jab, right? She jabs me, parry, left hook. Right? She jabs me again, parry. When he likes a bunch, lead elbow. Now again, he was here, square for the parries and the other counters, and now he switches more to his left side here. He's loaded, he's cocked already for this left hook, right? So if that jab comes in, he could slide in the inside real easy, and he's loaded up. Boom.
Oh my goodness.
Well, again, living up to their first fight will be a tough task, but these men, if anybody, seem to be up to the challenge. Figueiredo wants to ensure that that one in his loss column stays the same, but Moreno aims to become the first Mexican-born champion in UFC history. Bring in Ariel and Brett once again. Ariel there in his palatial estate there outside of New York City, and there we see Brett Okamoto kicking it there in Arizona. One person we have yet to see is Figueiredo. Brett, what's your concern level at this point?
High, yeah. The thing about these weigh-ins, Michael, is that you want to get here as soon as possible. You want to wake up, get on weight, get here, be the first guy on the scale. I mean, how many times do we see that? How many times are we doing these weigh-in shows and the people in the main, the co-main, the champions, the challengers, they're the first ones on because it just means more time to rehydrate. And so the fact that that Davison is late, that's already not ideal. And then when you add on the fact that this guy has missed weight, and he has missed weight for a title fight before. I mean, when he beat Joseph Benavidez back in February of last year, he should have become the champion there, but he missed weight. So there's a precedent to this. It's a precedent. He's had trouble making weight. Now we're running down to 12 minutes left. I did speak to the UFC's Mark Ratner during that unlocking the victory clip, and the rule in Arizona is that if Davison makes it down here, steps on the scale, he is heavy, he will be evaluated by a physician, and then he will be given an extra hour to continue to cut the weight if he chooses to do so. But he's got to come down here. He's got to step on the scale. We got to see what he weighs. 12 minutes.
So yes, now it is. Well, I don't know what time it is exactly there. I have 13 to be exact, and every minute counts here. Okay, so it's 12:12. We're going with the official clock right over here. I don't know who's producing said clock, but every minute counts as we await the arrival of Deiveson Figueiredo, the reigning, defending UFC flyweight champion. I have reached out to his manager on multiple occasions. You know, when you send a WhatsApp message, you can see if someone reads it or not. Thus far, he hasn't read it. I don't know what that means, if anything, as we approach now the 11-minute mark. I am told that Figueiredo is in the vicinity, but, you got to step on that scale. And as Brett said, if you step on the scale and you are a little bit over in Arizona, you can get that extra hour grace period. Also worth noting that Brad Riddell and Steven Peterson haven't shown up just yet as well. And those fights are interesting in their own right, especially the Brad Riddell-Drew Dober fight that we were all looking forward to and are still looking forward to in the lightweight division. So we have seen this before, and we have seen it with Deiveson Figueiredo, and he has performed well after missing weight. But we have been told time and again after that mishap against Joseph Benavidez that, he figured out the issues. And worth noting that he did make weight in July after that February fight where he missed weight, and then made weight again in November, and then made weight again 3 weeks later. So by the time we got to the December fight against Brandon Moreno, the first one in Las Vegas, the narrative that Figueiredo was too big for 125, I think, was pretty much dead. But here it is again. as we approach the 10-minute mark and we take a look at the scale over there in Arizona. 3 fighters left. The first fighter to step on the scale was Leon Edwards. He was there bright and early, very first guy. We had an influx of fighters very early on. 23 fighters showed up in the first 20 or 25 minutes. Everyone made weight, no issues whatsoever. Didn't need any retries, didn't need the hoop of shame, didn't need any of that. A couple other fighters trickled in, but we have seen some occasions in a title fight where either the champion or the challenger has missed weight. The most famous one was when challenger Travis Lutter missed weight prior to the Anderson Silva fight. But like I said, it is catastrophic. You can be stripped of your title, depending on what the UFC decides to do if you are a champion and you miss weight. So the pressure is on here for Davidson Figueiredo. 10 minutes to go. It's 1:50 p.m. Eastern time. It's 10:50 a.m. Pacific time over there. What's the buzz like? Set the scene for us, Brett. You're there. You can feel the tension. Are people starting to get nervous?
I think I think everybody is sort of just feeling what I articulated, is that this has happened before. And I will disagree with you on one thing you mentioned, Ariel, is that the narrative of him missing weight was dead. I can only speak for me personally, but once a guy misses weight for a championship fight, and you know that he is, I mean, that's one of the assets that he has in this 125-pound division, is that he is such a big guy, right? I mean, you always kind of are a little bit anxious about him getting down to 125 pounds. This process normally doesn't get much easier. If anything, it gets more difficult as you as your invisible bookshelf goes on and off.
This is the problem.
I'm sure you're
when
loving this, man. This is the drama.
Almost 2 hours.
This is the drama that you come for, though, right? I mean, this is why Ariel Helwani says this is his favorite day of fight week, is for reasons like this, right? Will he make it? Won't he make it? Will he come down? Will he choose to cut more weight if he's unable to make it? Will it be a title fight? For whom will it be a title fight? You are in your element, right, Ariel Helwani?
Yes, I say that often somewhat in jest, because I hate the idea of someone like Figueiredo struggling right now. We all know, we're sitting here comfortably. We're, we're well fed, we're well nourished, and these guys are, almost to the point of killing themselves to get down to that weight, and then they have to go into a cage and fight another human being. So you hope that he's doing this in a safe and healthy manner. You hope that he is, surrounded by people who are looking out for his best interest. And so it sounds like someone is coming onto the scale or the stage over there, and then will step on the scale. As you take a look now at the scale live in Arizona. I don't believe off the top of my head in the UFC that we've seen a fighter miss weight who is the champion. I will get that triply confirmed as we say hello to Steven Peterson, who looks to be tired and a little bit dehydrated in his own right. But we have seen this in other promotions where a champion has missed weight. Off the top of my head, I don't think we have ever seen, fairly certain, that we have never seen a champion miss weight. Perhaps the most famous example of a champion missing weight was back in the WEC days when our good friend Chael P. Sonnen fought Paulo Filho, and Filho was stripped, and the fight was turned into a non-title fight, so Chael never got a chance to win that belt. Although Paulo and his team did send Chael the belt afterwards in a nice gesture, and he has it in his palatial estate in Westland, Oregon. We sincerely hope that doesn't come to fruition here for Davidson Figueiredo, as we say hello to the Hoop of Shame for the first time, Steven Peterson.
148 and 1/2 pounds, the official weight for Steven Peterson.
Oh my. 148.5 pounds for Steven Peterson. Hopefully not a sign of things to come. So that means he is overweight by 2.5 pounds. 18-9 as a pro. Going up against the 21-year-old Chase Hooper. Steven Peterson last fought back in September of 2019. We have seen Hooper already. He made weight. It's a tough spot for a fighter. You have to stand up there. No one likes to miss weight. There's shame and embarrassment involved, and most importantly for these fighters, especially the young fighters, you lose money, 20%, 30% if the fight continues. Now, there's a whole negotiation process that's involved. He can come back if the commission allows him to, or they can just agree to fight at a catch weight, and he'd have to give up a portion of his purse. But that was the third fighter that we were waiting on. There are still 2 others left as we approach the 5-minute mark. It's been a long time since we've had a situation like this, and perhaps fitting for me on my last one here to have a situation like this with this kind of drama. Awaiting the arrival of Brad Riddell, who meets Drew Dober, and awaiting the arrival of Davison Figueiredo, the reigning defending UFC flyweight champion, who of course meets Brandon Moreno in the co-main event. And you see John Anik over there. When you see John walking back and forth, it feels like things are starting to get tense, Brett. It feels like this is serious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, is John walking away because a fighter's not there, or then he walks back because a fighter is there? I mean, they got it. We're running out of real estate. I mean, they got to be there soon, even if they're heavy or not. You got to come down and step on the scale. So, yeah, there is tension though for sure, and it of course is because of the champion. I mean, give Brad Riddell his due. We all are looking forward to that fight, but the real weight that truly matters here is, you know, after all that's going on in this flyweight division, after Davison Figueiredo knocks out Joseph Benavidez, he doesn't get the title. Even after that, Ariel, remember we were talking about, man, this could be the nail in the coffin for the flyweight division. The UFC finally decided they're going to move forward with it, and then the guy misses weight, knocks him out, and so we still don't have a champion after we had a vacant title fight. This could be the end of the flyweight division. It wasn't, and it's actually rebounded quite nicely. I think there's interest there. I think you brought up a great point earlier that the flyweight title fight is in a very, very marketable spot here. They're getting the rub of Israel Adesanya, Marvin Vettori title fight. They're getting the rub of a Nate Diaz fight. This would be not good for Davison Figueiredo to come out here and miss weight.
And again, we have seen situations where the challenger, a guy like Yoel Romero, has missed weight going into a title fight, and that rendered the fight a non-title fight. We have seen situations where one of the fighters involved in a vacant title fight has missed weight. We saw it with Anthony Pettis against Max Holloway. Of course, we saw it with Davison Figueiredo against Joseph Benavidez. But in the history, the now long and illustrious history of the UFC, which dates back to 1993, we have not seen a champion.
All right, next fighter to the scale, taking part in the featured prelim live on ESPN in the UFC's lightweight division, Brad "Quake" Riddell.
All right, so here's the aforementioned Brad Riddell as we approach 2 minutes to go. Riddell bringing out the hoop of shame. You would hope that almost they would pause the clock here, because what if this weigh-in takes a little too much time? I feel like once we hit the 2-minute warning, the clock should stop, like in football, so Figueiredo doesn't get docked if he's waiting in the back. But nevertheless, here's Brad Riddell, who meets Drew Dober, 9-1 as a pro.
155, the official weight for Brad Riddell.
Okay, so we saw Steven Peterson miss weight. We have just seen Brad Riddell make weight, 155, championship weight for Brad Riddell, who is undefeated in the UFC, 3-0 inside the octagon, always produces fun fights. Typically, they go the distance. He's coming off a unanimous decision win over Alex Da Silva. Prior to that, Magomed Mustafayev, he beat via split decision. And then Jamie Malarkey in his debut back in 2019. A minute and 20 seconds left on this here weigh-in. We have seen situations. Oh, and here he comes.
UFC flyweight champion,
Davison
Figueiredo.
Oh my gosh. Here we go, guys. A minute to go. The hoop is out there. He's going to walk right onto the scale with the hoop. He has to make 125.0 or less. Cannot be a pound, a half a pound, an ounce of a pound over 125. All eyes, all pressure is on that man's shoulders.
125, the official weight for the champ, Davison Figueiredo.
At
Your
the
flyweight
buzzer.
title fight is official.
My God, with 40 seconds to spare, Davison Figueiredo makes weight in one of the most unbelievable scenes that we have ever seen in the now 5-year history of the morning weigh-ins. Davison Figueiredo, you see him right there, averting a massive, massive crisis, a disaster, a potential disaster. Is good to go. He makes weight. The co-main is now set. And so, Fred, as we catch our breath here, and as we take a look at Figueiredo, who is no doubt tired, no doubt dehydrated, no doubt malnourished, the attention now must be turned to how does this affect the fight, right? I mean, clearly this wasn't a walk in the park. Clearly he had issues. He made it. Good on him. But now you wonder about the hydration, recovery leading up to Saturday.
Yeah, well, first of all, what a fight week, man. I mean, the press conference yesterday, and now the tension of this weigh-in. This has been an interesting fight week, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, for us to just say that, hey, he's missed weight before but went out and looked spectacular, you can't just bank on that. You can't say like, oh, this guy just has the ability to do that. No, anytime that you run your body down to the point at which he did. I mean, he did not. Obviously, he looked very uncomfortable. Waleed was at his side, kind of steadying him as he walked. It makes you wonder about later rounds, certainly. I mean, the last time that he did miss weight and he did beat Joseph Benavidez, that was a quick fight, and if there's one thing that Davison, might still be in his mind, and we were talking about the fact that he shoved Brandon Moreno yesterday at the press conference, I'm sure he was frustrated that he could not get him out of there last time. I mean, you know that. You know how many fighters have talked about that. I'm hitting him with everything I've got. I'm hitting him with shots that make other guys fall down, and he's not going down. I think that frustration could still be there for Davison, and so, hey, if he's physically compromised at all, usually when you see it is later in the fight. So if he hits Brandon Moreno with some good shots tomorrow and Moreno doesn't go down, how will this weight cut affect him? It's a very, very good question.
Nothing like this in the world of sports, Michael. It's an amazing thing. And to put it into perspective, for those that may not really understand just how crazy this all is, imagine Pat Mahomes the night before the Super Bowl having to dehydrate himself, do all the things that these men and women do, step on a scale, and then go out and play in the biggest game of his life. Imagine Kawhi Leonard prior to Game 7 having to do the same. This is their Game 7. This is their Super Bowl. This man's life has changed as a result of being a UFC champion. And you just saw him on the scale, dehydrated, tired, shaking, and now in about, 36 hours, has to go fight another individual who's in great spirits, in great form, great shape, and try to keep that belt. Oh my gosh, what unbelievable pressure. And that's why my respect for these men and women is at an all-time high, because no other athlete on the planet has to do what Davison Figueiredo just did and will have to do on Saturday night.
And he did it just under the wire. The anxiety, the tension, it was all there, the intrigue, and that's why this is the favorite day of fight week for one Ariel Helwani. Ariel, appreciate the time. Brett, as always, appreciate your time as well from there in Arizona. Much more from these guys over the course of the weekend as we get you set for UFC 263. Adesanya versus Vettori 2. Adesanya moving back down to 185 after his loss to Jan Blachowicz at 205 in his last bout. But this is where you can keep up with everything UFC 263, ESPNplus.com, of course, DC and Helwani podcast, and also you can follow at ESPN MMA on social media. But what a morning, afternoon it was for some of the world's best fighters. We got Nate Diaz making his much anticipated return, taking on Leon Edwards. Both fighters may be thinking they can get a title fight if they win this bout. And then you got Brandon Moreno looking for a victory, this time against Davison Figueiredo, who barely made weight under the wire at 125, the champ. And then Marvin Vettori taking on Israel Adesanya. We'll see you Saturday for UFC 263.
concluded. Thank you for your services.